Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending another session of the House Committee on Finance. I want to welcome all of our members back. I know it's been a busy week and still more to go, but I'm going to try and get the people's business done. And as usual, I want to thank all of the people in the technical department, our clerks, our fiscal staff preparing us for this. We've got an interesting hearing tonight that we will go through, but first of all, I need the clerk to call roll, please, to take attendance.
Chairman Abdi.
Present.
Vice Chair Slater.
Present.
Vice Chair Mazakowski.
Present.
Representative Amore.
Present.
Representative Baginski.
Present.
Representative Barrows.
Present.
Representative Diaz. Representative Edwards.
Present.
Representative Hull.
Present.
Representative Nadone.
Present.
Representative O'Brien.
Here.
Representative Quattrucci. Representative Giro.
Present.
Representative Tabone. Representative Velo Wilkinson. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Before we get into my opening remarks, what I'm going to do is hold this bill. We only have one bill this evening, and we want to hold that bill for further study. And again, as I always say, holding the bill for further study simply means that it is put into play, because generally, not always, but generally there's more work to be done on these bills, and this keeps it alive. So the bill tonight is House Bill 5223 by Sakarchi, Brzezinski, myself, Ackerman, Shellcross, Smith, Kennedy, and Corvese. And it is an act that enables the State Lottery Division of the Department of Revenue to enter into a contract with IGT Global Solutions Corporation and contract extensions with Twin River and affiliates of Twin River. So that is Bill 5223. Can I get a motion, please, to hold that bill for further
So
study?
moved, Chairman.
Yeah, Chairman Ruggiero and has moved, and I think Rep. Brzezinski and Floor Leader Edwards has seconded. So would you please call a roll on that, Mr. Clerk?
Chairman Abdi.
Yes?
Vice Chair Slater.
Yes.
Vice Chair Mazakowski.
Yes.
Representative Amore.
Yes.
Representative Baginski.
Yes.
Representative Barrows.
Yes.
Representative Diaz. Representative Edwards.
Yes.
Representative Hull.
Yes.
Representative Nadone.
Yes.
Representative O'Brien.
Yes.
Representative Quattrucci. Representative Giro.
Yes.
Representative Tabone.
Yes.
And Representative Velo Wilkinson.
Okay, thank you. Then Bill 5223 will be held for further study. And I also want to welcome our guests that I'm looking at on my screen that are out in the stratosphere who will be giving us some remarks later today. So welcome all of you, and thank you for taking the time to come in with us this evening. Everybody's input is important. The hearing will begin with a PowerPoint presentation from our fiscal staff, Sharon Reynolds. Then the committee will hear from IGT and Twin River representatives who've been invited to participate via WebEx. Members will ask questions of them and invited guests from the lottery before moving to public testimony. We'll take public testimony when all other business is done, but we should be able to move through it efficiently and quickly. I will send along all the participants' names and emails once I have them, and I think I've got them all. And I will intermittently name the people who've sent in written testimony also. Everything is online on the Finance Committee's page and on the House of Representatives line. Everything's online that you would need for this, all the presentations. But I do want to recognize and give a credence to the people who did do that. So the first thing we're going to do is listen to a presentation from our fiscal staff, after which we'll be able to clarify any questions that you may have based upon her presentation to help us. This is not the first time we've heard this bill. So I want to make that clear. This is not the first time we've heard this bill. And most of you who are here now were on the Finance Committee when we heard it before, but you still may have some lingering questions. And the way we want to do this tonight, as we do all of our bills, is that it is an instructional time to learn something, because we really do have to go back and look at these bills. This is not a floor debate. This is a time to ask questions if you have them. If you have any just pure statements that you want to make, hold those until the end, and I'll allow you to do that. But as we go through this process, please try to frame a question that you may have so that we can all get information, and our colleagues can get that too. So Sharon, would you please start us off? Sorry, Floor Leader Edwards.
Yeah, just before she starts, have there been any changes to what we heard last year, or is the bill the same?
Sharon's going to go over all of that.
Okay, thank you,
That's her
Sharon.
job. Yeah, she'll take us through that tonight. I had the same question. Thank you. Sharon, please.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. I have been asked to simply run through the bill as you've heard it before, a little bit of history on what you've heard before and any notable changes. You'll see as we get into it, it is pretty much the same bill you heard in July, but I'm going to offer a little bit of perspective on each thing in case you have any questions, and certainly need a refresher. I'm sure all of us did. So this essentially is the most recent version of a plan to authorize the lottery to renew long-term contracts for services in conjunction with economic development requirements, with IGT to be the exclusive provider of lottery services, and Twin River, now Bally, the joint venture with IGT to provide VLT machines. Back in 2019, there was a proposal in House Bill 6266 for a 20-year lottery contract extension where it included a framework of terms. It was a relatively small bill compared to this one. It was introduced in late June 2019. There were several House and Senate committee hearings on that bill in the fall of 2019, but neither chamber took further action. In 2020, an altered proposal was submitted to the Assembly for its consideration. This included, the major revision was that the VLT provider arrangement was changed to include Twin River via a joint venture with IGT. It also added related investment and job commitments and extended the existing Twin River contract to line up with the end of the new proposal. Your first hearing on that was March 11th, 2020. We all know what happened after that. However, by July 14th, there was a sub-A that addressed a number of regulatory and other particulars that were raised in the March hearing. You had that hearing on July 14th. However, that is where the action on that bill ended. So before you tonight is House Bill 5223, which is, as I said, an updated version of the last bill you heard in July. Some of the changes include the name change, Twin River, which is now Bally. Some other stylistic changes in terms of how things are referred to in the bill. Implementation dates for certain items are advanced to coincide with the passage of time, and I will note them as we go along, or you'll see them noted and know that they're a year later than they were before. But effectively, it's the same proposal that was heard in July in the sub-A. For those of you lucky enough to have been here for all of the hearings, these slides will look very familiar, and I'm just going to talk through them big picture to orient folks who have not seen them before and allow you to look at that kind of on your own time. But a little bit of a history of the lottery and revenues that have been received through the lottery by the state over the last 3 decades. Back in 2003, the General Assembly allowed the lottery to enter into a multi-year master contract with then GTEC, building and maintaining its global corporate headquarters in Providence and requiring 1,000 jobs. It also incorporated provisions of 3 existing contracts. Those are listed here, but they had all been contracts with IGT, and the big master contract brought all of these under a single one. As we discussed, there have been changes on this contract over time. Also, the lottery and the lottery composition has also changed. It's now under executive branch control, and there have been long-term contracts issued for the facilities that house the casinos. A number of changes over time. Looking at the last 20 years of revenues through the lottery and by source, you can see the overwhelming majority of lottery revenues to come from VLTs. That's the gray bar there. You can see that table games and sports revenues, sports betting revenues come in later in the mix last several years. And then And as will be a theme a little bit, as you see the added 2020 data, there's a decline for 2020. So there's places where I'll retain a fiscal 19 reference, so you get a feel for a normal year. As a percent of state general revenues, lottery topped out at almost 12%. It's only coming in at 7% for 2020, but again, that's also affected by the current pandemic. So that data is not is hopefully not illustrative of what's going to happen in the next few years. I've also got here some scope of services that are included in the contract as a reminder, because there are a number of services that the IGT provides to the state, and there are ways in which they earn money from providing these services to pay for them. IGT is responsible for technology and infrastructure equipment and supplies used for the sale and management of traditional lottery products. So going into the gas station to buy a scratch ticket or place a Powerball wager. There's about 1,200 retailers, and it generates about $260 million in annual sales. So that also includes monitor games, Keno and Bingo. Vendor payments are based on sales volume, so retailers get 5 to 8% depending on the game. IGT receives a percent of the activity based on total sales. So as I mentioned, we're coming in at about $260 million annually in a normal year. So that means they get 5% of the action. If it goes up over 275, they would get 4% under the new proposal. Under the current contract, get only 1%. Part of the explanation for this change was to incentivize increasing that volume, so they would share in more of the profit, and so would the state. Lottery sales, those traditional lottery sales, have not been a growth area for the state. You can see over time, as I mentioned before, VLTs is the big area, and this table kind of demonstrates that for you. One thing I'd like to note is that back in 2019, the original proposal called for IGT to take over the current sales force at the lottery. The 2021 bill, just like the sub-A from last year, excludes that transfer. There are some related services not in the original 2003 contract, but would be included in this because there are side contracts for those. The iLottery is I'm pretty sure that's already been implemented. I might have to correct that date, but it's already underway anyway, and I'll stand corrected by folks ready to testify. But then it would then again be replaced in 2033. The instant ticket printing, locking in a price agreement reached a few years ago and adding new products over time. Again, these are unchanged from the original proposal. There are maintenance upgrades. There had been previous requirements, and there would be new requirements to regularly update hardware and software, and some detail not contained in the bill about how that would work. As the internal control system was replaced, the full system would be replaced again 2031, and there are prescriptive provisions in keeping items up to date with options for further expansion. So that's the traditional lottery component of this. Casino operations, the revenues earned through VLTs are split among many entities, depending on the role they have in that operation. IGT has 2 roles and related to the VLTs. And you can see from this pie chart, the state still takes about 61% of the net terminal income. The facilities take the next largest piece. The IGT has 2 distinct roles: the central communication system provider, and then they are also a VLT machine, or what we call a technology provider. And at the time, and I'm not 100% sure, it's still about 85%, but most of the machines that are on the floor are still owned by IGT. This had been accumulated, it used to be about 50, and then they accumulated a number of businesses that own machines, which increased their share. On the central communication system, this records the transaction data for the revenue splits and the flow of money. And then on the VLTs, they also service and maintain all the VLTs. As the central communications provider, as I mentioned, that is a % of net terminal income right now, and this is unchanged from all previous proposals. The bill calls for up to $500 million in net terminal income, would yield 2.5% of that for IGT. Were the volume to increase up to $1 billion, they would get 1% on that next increment, and then over that, 2.5%. In fiscal 2019, the value of this 2.5% was about $12.7 million. There's 2.5% of net terminal income so in FY 2019, the value of that 2.5% to IGT, the service provider, was a payment of $12.7 million. As I mentioned, VLT machines is also something IGT provides, and those VLT machine providers are paid a % of net terminal income at their machines. It's 7%, and that is also unchanged from the 2019 proposal. If the daily machine take is even higher, the % drops, but that has not been the case for a while. So I don't think we ever reached that one. I'll stand corrected as well. But so in 2019, the daily VLT per machine was about $277. And payouts to all providers were $36 million. So just again, to get a sense of from what's coming in, what's going out, that's $36 million on VLTs. Multiple vendors currently provide VLT machines. There's a process by which an efficiency review is done in order to redistribute shares if performance is weak among certain providers. It's a tool for the state to maximize revenues and performance. We've been through this a few times, so I'm not going to dwell on it, but providers have gained and lost machines. Lottery has discretion on that. You'll see in some future slides that the new situation is trying to achieve the same kind of efficiency determination, but it'll be done within this joint venture. So if we move on to, in the proposal, the VLTs, when it was first proposed back in 2019, the plan was to start replacing VLTs immediately, and to my knowledge, most of that has happened. There are many new machines already in place. And then future VLTs would be replaced a minimum of 6%, and there'd be additional upgrades required beyond the 6%. There'd be an increase in the number of so-called premium machines that would be required, but at no additional cost to the facilities, and minimum standards for review of the lowest performing machines. As we discussed, one of the major changes from 2019 to 2020 is that the new legislation proposes that 100% of the VLTs be controlled by a joint venture between IGT and Twin River, now Bally, and that would be not effective until January 1, 2023. In the intervening months, Twin River would take control over the non-IGT machines on their floor until the joint venture begins. There'd be this new efficiency process, but that would be a couple of years in the making. And as was discussed back in July, the plan was that there'd still be a cap on the number of IGT manufactured machines. You've had a number of discussions about a mix of machines on the floor, and as we talked about in July, that 40% maximum was actually inserted into the July version. It had not been in the March version, although it was the plan. That was added based on some of the issues raised in the hearing. There are other elements of the contract related to economic development. So one side is the service provision, and the other side is the economic development requirements. The original contract called for IGT to make a minimum investment within 5 years of $100 million and maintain 1,000 jobs. Those jobs had to pay a minimum of 150% of minimum wage. We've done this enough times that I had to update what minimum wage was. And so 150% of minimum wage is now $17.25 an hour. The original version you saw in 2019 had that same those same requirements for job payments, but 100 more jobs, and then 50 million more in investments, although that wasn't required to be done in a shorter period of time. The proposal before you now retains the 150 million, retains the 1,100 jobs, which is 100 more than currently required, but then also adds a new requirement that the per job investment can be 150% of minimum. The per job minimum has to be 150% of minimum wage, but the entire payroll must equal 250%, an average. And so that is a change from 2019, but again, same as you saw in July. In terms of the minimum investments, this minimum investment does include any of the any of the cash paid to the state, as well as VLTs bought since July 1st, 2019. We talked about the job requirements and the different times that it wasn't met, and some audits. And in fact, we talked back in August of 2019 about the value of the jobs that were currently in play. And that led to some of the changes we are seeing here, and that is that minimum payroll representing more than 150% of minimum wage. There's also a requirement that requires IGT to let Rhode Island have a shot at competing for any new jobs that they might be looking to relocate or add in another place. An additional requirement like that was added for Twin River. And then there's also a provision towards the end of the bill for annual reporting on any compliance issues and the remedies taken. This is in response to concerns that when compliance issues came up, you may not have known how they were remedied, what decisions were made, and what contract amendments were made. So that's been added and again was part of the July version. Also, the bill calls for liquidated damages on missed jobs based on a rolling 2-year average, assigning a per missed FTE cost and a percent value of the payroll-based shortfall. So again, another, a remedy should any of these things be missed that is short of canceling the contract, which is always an option for the state. For Twin River, with their inclusion in the joint venture, the bill calls for additional requirements in terms of investments, $100 million, a 50,000 square foot expansion to the facility in Lincoln. And again, this came up in between March and July. Some language was added to ensure that the same investments could not be double counted. While I don't believe that was the intent, the bill clearly specifies that you can only count an investment once. Some new job requirements for Twin River as well. Same liquidated damages, additional compliance, audit, and reporting requirements. And then we talked a little bit in the beginning about upfront payments. In the original contract, there was a $12.5 million upfront payment when it was issued. The current contract or the current proposal calls for a $25 million payment over 2 years. You can see that in 2019, the plan was to have it paid for fiscal 21 and 22. Each time a new session happens and the bill is before you again, that year slips. So what's before you now would be for 23 and 24. There are other items in the contract, not in the original contract, but may have been added over time that are now incorporated, as we talked about starting back in 2019, web hosting services and other separate things. When we talk about the IGT being the exclusive lottery provider, sports betting has been carved out of that. And in terms of remote sports betting, the idea is that 18 months after the app is launched, the lottery could consider adding new providers if that was good for them, if that was good for the state and the lottery wanted to do that. Something that was new in the 20 version with the inclusion of Twin River was naming rights for a park in the 195 district. The revisions in July made that non-binding on the 195 District Commission over concerns that may not be what they wanted, but it's in there as permissive. And then a lot of discussion you had in both March and July was around credit agreements for Twin River sale and leaseback transactions. And essentially, there's revisions here to the regulatory requirements allowing them to take on more debt if needed, although some restrictions are added in there that the lottery flagged as something they'd want to see from a regulatory perspective. On the effective dates, it's designed such that none of the agreements are effective until most of the agreements take effect. There's a couple of small ones that are excluded from that, just from a timing perspective, but the idea is that these all have to take effect simultaneously. As you know, Twin River has a separate master contract agreement with the state for its provision of services at the casinos. Initially passed back in 2005 for 15 years. It's been extended a couple of times, so this would align the end of that to the end of this agreement. Additionally, something that came in July, which was described again when we had the July hearing, but the promotional points language was amended to allow for a prior year's base when figuring out what 20% of promo points is, given the fact that there was already some shutdowns in play, and so it allowed for the possibility of using a prior year when figuring out what 20% represents. And then again, throughout, there's additional reporting requirements and efficiency reporting requirements. So hopefully I've summarized where this has been and where it is now. And like I said in the beginning, it's essentially the one you heard in July with some just more cosmetic changes, including the name and some date changes, but the contents are essentially the same. I'm happy to try and answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Sharon, very much for that. So right now what we will do is get into a part of the discussion where if Sharon went over something that you didn't understand or didn't know, we can feel free to clarify any questions we have to Sharon before we go with our invited guest. I just want to, if I could, make sure that there are 2 or 3 big points that most people read about in the papers or understand. And I know you've already said that that they're in this contract, but I want to be sure because we had a bunch of questions on those. One is the upfront payment of $25 million, but that's, as you said, in 2 installments, and it is not 2 installments of $25 million, which would be 50, because I've had that question asked of me several times. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. And that number 2, the FTE count of 1,100, we talked about that before, and I think we settled most of those issues, but that number of 1,100 still remains solid net. Okay, so thank you for that. And then the facility obligation for IG to retain the 10 Memorial Boulevard location, that is still in, because I've had questions asking me, well, would they move somewhere else, that kind of thing. So I like to make sure that not only does the public understand it, but our committee understands the little intricate details of things, well, the bigger picture, because some of you have questions, I know, on the little intricate details. And as we go through the discussion tonight, I'll try to make sure that I get on the record exactly what those are. So for those, I do want to say that you can't see it in the audience, but we have people on the committee who are also on other committees, so they may be going in and out during this particular time, but they're not leaving because they don't want to be here, but they have to be in another committee doing the same kind of thing. So I think Rep. Barros wants to lead with a couple of questions of Sharon.
I think it's just a clarification, Sharon. In terms of the jobs, right? I mean, what constitutes a job? I mean, is it, the lobbyists, the consultants? I mean, I didn't see exactly what, it has 1,100 jobs, or I'm not sure exactly what types of jobs they are.
So if you have the bill in front of you on page 2, line 4 through 14, it's defined there. And that definition is the one that's in play, is the current requirement. There had been, as I think the chairman mentioned, a couple of discussions about altering that, including more, including fewer, and where this bill lands is it's right back to the original who was counted. And so if you want, I can read it if that's helpful, or it requires a minimum hours of employment. There are people who are not directly employed, as long as they're essentially people who are employed because of their relationship with IGT, which I think folks from the companies can explain to you an example of that. But like part-time employees are counted as part-time, so not unlike how the state counts its FTEs. If you're only working 20 hours a week, you only count as a fractional FTE. So the 1,100 is an FTE, not a head count. And then there are provisions for allowing people who are outsourced or consultant providers, as long as it's because of their, it's essentially wholly working for this company. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Chairwoman Ruggiero, please.
Thank you, Chairman. And Sharon, thank you. I have a question on page 39. What exactly is qualifying expense? Slide 39. I'm not quite sure. I understand the timing, the amount, refundable, but what are qualifying expenses?
This is about whether or not it qualifies as as part of the $150 million investment. So there were some questions that came up both in 2019 and then again in 2020 when IGT made its initial payment to the state of $12.5 million. That counted towards its obligation of a $100 million investment. And so because it came up a couple times in 2019, I just kind of made sure it's actually expressly noted in here now where I hadn't been before, just so people knew that a $25 million payment counts towards the $150 million investment requirement.
And the 12.5 million amount, and now the 25 million in 2021, which I understand is over 2 years, 2023 and 2024. Has the state already agreed to that payment, or is that still negotiable?
This is really just authority to enter into an agreement and enter into a contract under these terms. So the state has agreed to nothing.
Okay, so it's still in negotiation in some ways.
Essentially, you're looking at what was ultimately an agreement in principle, converted into a bill, giving the authority for the lottery to negotiate a contract that deals with this.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Oh, thank you very much. Did you have a question, Floor Leader Edwards, prior to this? Okay. Leader Felipe, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Sharon. I would actually like to go back to the qualifying expense. I was on the same thread that Chairwoman Ruggiero was looking at. The $150 million that IGT is required to spend over the course of this contract, that is to carry out their obligations that they have sprinkled throughout this 29-page document, I presume, correct?
Those obligations are allowable against that.
Against it.
Yeah.
So essentially they have to spend $150 million over the life of the contract to carry out their obligations.
Correct.
And that would include the purchase of the VLTs.
Yes.
Thank you. On October 3rd, 2019, Mr. Christofouli stated that over the last 7 years, there have been a lot of investments that IGT was required to make under their contract that were deferred. All of those deferred investments are coming due, and I think they wanted to try and avoid them or only make them in the context of having an extension. Are there existing obligations of IGT, do you know? Maybe this might be better for them. Are there obligations under the existing contract that IGT has not undertaken that are being rolled into this $150 million? Do you know?
So I think It's probably best to have the lottery correct anything I say that's incorrect on
Okay.
this, and that's why we have them on the line.
Thank you.
But I would just say that the things that can be included in the 150 are lined up in the bill, and my understanding is that it's some of the VLT purchases can count. But I believe the requirement for the other things don't count for the previous requirements. But again, I'll stand corrected on that.
And do you know if there's anything anywhere about IGT being required to undertake those prior obligations before this new contract is executed?
So one of the important things that we kind of talked about a lot in 2019 is that the contract changes over time. So to the extent a contract revision was executed that said this obligation is delayed to this date, then they're in compliance with their contract, even if it's a delayed because the state has agreed to that.
So I guess the question, maybe not for you, but the question would be what current obligations are outstanding, and by entering to this agreement, are we not getting the benefit of our prior bargain? Are we not getting investments that IGT had already committed to? And maybe that's better posed to the lottery and IGT.
Yeah, I think it's good to have the lottery weigh in on the current status of all the contracts and the amendment and the amended versions of them right now. And then just to say that should another contract be entered into under these terms, you would actually get an annual report on any changes, not have to wait to ask if there were any changes to the contract.
I'm glad we have that annual report. That's something that I think we should have had before. Quick question on the sale leaseback. Mr. Christofouli was kind enough to discuss it with me, and I finally understand how it works, where essentially Twin River would sell a facility to some financing company, raise a lot of cash, and then the finance company would own the facility and Twin River would enter into a lease for that facility. How is it restricted now? In your testimony, you said on slide 41 that the sale leaseback provisions has restrictions, and I'm just curious how the state's protected.
So, and again, I'll let the lottery talk about this because this was in response to one of the, I'll say, 6 points they made on the March legislation, that they wanted to make sure that if in fact Twin River were allowed to enter into some sort of arrangement like this, that the proceeds had to accrue to some benefit of the facility itself, not some other benefit.
That's what I was getting at.
Speaking, yeah.
Yeah, I'm hoping that if we authorize the sale of this facility, then those monies would have to be invested in the state of Rhode Island. If there's a financing company that becomes the owner of the facility, and for some reason Twin River isn't able to make its lease payments, or Bally isn't able to make its lease payments, and I don't anticipate that, how would that work? Would now we be in business with this owner of the facility? Would they be in control? What kind of guarantees do we have that we know who we could potentially be in business with in the future?
Well, definitely. I know Marilyn's on the call, and she lived through the BLB bankruptcy, so she can certainly speak to that. But just to clarify, the net proceeds limit is limiting the sale leaseback transaction to only repaying debt unless otherwise approved by the division or DBR. So just that's the, and then again, I'll have to let the regulators talk to you about some of those provisions. They're certainly not spelled out here.
And that would be domestic debt, state of Rhode Island, debt incurred for operations in the state of Rhode Island, not for foreign acquisitions, foreign as in other states, I would
Repaying
assume.
debt?
Yeah.
Yeah, again, this is going to be part of the regulatory agreement, and I'm thinking that DBR is probably, and the lottery can talk to you a little bit more about the esoteric nature of that.
Yeah.
If you recall, those are all things done by regulation, and one of the parts of the 2020 legislation was to loosen some of the regulatory requirements that Twin River had to enter into in order to make this next set of investments, so on their debt ratio.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll see if I have any more. Yeah, about promo points. I've never really wrapped my head around it, to be honest. 20%, is that 20% of net terminal income is used as promo points?
Yeah, so it's free play. And so there's always been a debate over how much free play generates more revenue versus costs. And so Twin River has always had to come to the state for permission to offer free play. And it started out at, I want to say 5%, and then it grew over time. They would argue and have argued before this committee that that's required to compete with other facilities. One of the other issues that came up over time was how that was treated in terms of splitting up income. And so the 20% is not something that they would have to pay for on their own, out of their own proceeds. That was one of the other things.
But, so I just want to be clear, I'm all for promo points, I think you need to do it. Do we all pay for that proportionally? So it's the state's 60% of that 20%?
Everybody
Twin Rivers,
shares in it.
Everyone shares in it
Yes,
according to the statute,
yes.
okay.
There had been a debate about that, but this clarifies that this is, everybody shares.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Sharon.
Yeah, well.
Okay, thank you very much for those questions. That's okay, Rep. Barrows. This is the time to get your questions out. Keep going.
So, Sharon, to follow up on Leader Felipe's questions. So, if I understand this correctly, we're basically allowing this to get to the floor so that the lottery can do whatever they want, and we won't have much say in anything that they do decide to do. Is that correct?
I would not characterize it that way. Because contained in here, it's enabling. If they can't reach an agreement under these terms, then they would not be enabled to do that.
Well, I guess the terms that we won't know what those terms are until the contract is entered into, I'm assuming.
No, I would say that more so than any previous version of the legislation from 2019 or even 2003, this spells out most of the terms. There are a handful of things that are probably not exactly spelled out, but such as replacement schedule, exactly how it would work. But over time, this has grown from just a handful of pages to now nearly 30 pages as you ask for more things to be memorialized in any piece of enabling legislation versus in a future contract. So much more limiting in terms of what could be negotiated.
Thanks, Sharon. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from anyone else of Sharon before we morph into our presenters tonight? Yes, Leader Felipe, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm having a hard time with this, I think similar to Representative Barrows. So we currently have a bidding law on the books that the administration could follow to put all this out to bid. They wouldn't have to come before us. We wouldn't have to be having these conversations. But essentially, the administration is coming to us and saying, exempt us from your existing bidding laws so we can enter into a contract. But they haven't provided that contract to any of us. Does Finance have a draft copy? Does anybody have a draft copy on what this agreement is?
No, everything that's been provided thus far is the principles of the contract, which has, to my knowledge, not been drawn up, just the agreement in principle around which the contract would be made.
Okay. I mean, just, Mr. Chairman, we have maybe billion-dollar companies now trying to enter into an agreement with the state, asking us to exempt them from our public laws. At a minimum, I think we should all see the contract before we pass a law exempting the state. I mean, they have rooms full of lawyers. Why can't they just draw up the contract, come to an agreement, and then come to us and say, legislature, please exempt us from your laws so that we can enter into this contract? That's just my perspective. I'd really like to see the contract before we exempt big companies from our laws. Thank you.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Your comments are well noted, Leader. Okay. Are there any other questions of Sharon before we move on? And I think I have one final one for her. I'm trying to remember what it was now. It's about sports, the part about sports betting. I'm not sure we covered that, where it's not currently in the master contract, but sports betting will specifically exclude it from the master contract. Am I correct on that? and that IGT agrees to waive exclusivity for remote sports bettings after 18 months. I'm just trying to figure out what that really means in plain language so that I can explain that to people when I'm asked that question.
So the deal to get remote sports betting going was one provider. However, once that's up and running, if the state decides that allowing other providers into the market, a DraftKings or someone else, like I'm not a sports bettor, so I can't tell you, but I'm sure there's other providers. If the state decides it's in its best interest to offer that to bring other providers on after that 18-month period, it has the right to do so.
But they do have exclusive rights for...
On the remote.
On the remote, yes, for at least 18 months. Is that...
Yes, which
Okay.
it may be up.
Yeah, I know it. Okay, great. Chairwoman Ruggiero, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just for my own clarification, and so this bill is just authorizing the state to negotiate a contract, correct?
Yes, it is authorizing the state to enter into an agreement, but with some very specific things laid out. It would have to be under these terms, not just an open,
No, I
you
understand.
can, yes.
So who exactly is negotiating or compiling the contract, if you will? Who's responsible
So,
for that?
the lottery is actually the division, so if you look in Section 1, it's to authorize the lottery division of the Department of Revenue to agree to an extension, so they would be the primary people included in this. That would be the other party.
So this is really the blueprint that negotiation has to
Correct.
follow?
Correct.
Okay. And that's why it's pretty tight in terms of what can be done by the lottery?
Yes.
I wanted to be clear on that so
Yes.
people don't, so thank you.
Correct.
Very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Okay, does that exhaust the questions of the panel for Sharon at this point in time? Okay, great. Now what we'll do is we will hear from some of our invited guests. And Sharon, I want to make sure I get this right as to who I need to call up first. So I think you're looking at the same, you're looking at the same one that I am, because we have a number of guests who are online and waiting to go, to add some color to what we were talking about, but I want to make sure I call the first ones first. Okay, great. So what we'll do is, I see him on the line, Bob Vincent. Yeah, how you doing, sir? Great. What I would like for you to do is right now I have a number of people, and we're going to get to all of them, but if you have a specific order in which you wanted to get comments, then I'm all for that too, rather than calling people out of order.
Yes, we do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity. I'll speak and offer some introductory remarks, followed by Mark Crisafulli and Jay Gendron, as well as the three other people joining us tonight. And been before you in the past. One is Rick Barber, and two, Mark and Lee of IGT, and Elizabeth Seguro of Bally. So I think each will introduce the next as we go to try to make this efficient and run smoothly, if that's what they do.
Okay, then it would help if the person who finishes speaking just introduced the next person, if they know when that comes up, and that way we can stay in order. And I'll do my best to keep tabs of that. But I think you're up first, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'd like to introduce myself, reintroduce myself to some of you. I'm Bob Vincent, I'm chairman of IGT Global Solutions Company. As I mentioned, Mark Crisafulli is here. Mark's the CEO of Twin River, as well as the executive vice president of Bally's. Jay Gendron is from IGT, is our global chief operating officer for lottery. And both Mark and Jay were the architects of this deal, have led most of the negotiations. As mentioned, Rachel Barber, Kim Mark and Lee, and Elizabeth Seguro. We'll talk about various aspects of our company. I'll provide some brief remarks, and my colleagues will get through details. I should also direct you to a short video presentation that we prepared that is made available to you. It summarizes the proposal, and I think gives you a pretty good sense of some of the support that we do. I'll admit that it's hard to know where to begin. First, let me thank you for the expeditious handling of this legislation. It's very, very important. We appreciate that you're dealing with many pressing issues while trying to climb a mountain to get to the other side of this pandemic. Thank you for treating this with urgency and priority. So much has changed since our last visit. We concluded our testimony on a companion bill that was before the Senate Finance Committee on March 12th last year. The next day, as you all recall, the world has changed. As a business, we reacted quickly to protect our employees, service our customers, and secure our future. Across-the-board pay cuts from the CEO on down were instituted along with those. All of us were impacted. Offices were closed, and many, including our Rhode Island headquarters, remained closed and staff working from home. We look forward to a return to office shortly at these two times. Having a strong balance sheet and a resilient business foundation, IGT was successful in renegotiating our entire debt portfolio at very favorable rates, so we have no debt coming due in the next few years. And I offer that so you can be assured that we're on solid financial ground, ample resources and liquidity to follow through on our commitments. We also realigned and simplified our organizational structure into two global business units, lottery and gaming, to be more efficient and responsive to our customers' needs. And I'll note that Jay Gendron, who previously, when he was before you, was running our North American lottery and global ticket business, has taken on added responsibilities and authority for our entire portfolio of lottery and gaming. Through diligent management and for numerous stressful times, we achieved the $500 million in cost savings across the board in 2012. And we expect to make $200 million of this savings permanent, structural by the end of this year. To share that with you to give you a sense of the environment in which we operate and the actions we've taken to make certain that IGT, and Mark will talk about that as well, are fully capable to make the kind of commitments necessary to successfully meet the obligations set forth in this legislation. So much has changed. I wanted to make that point directly clear. The world has changed over the last year, but our commitment to fulfilling the deal has not. We are committed to keeping 1,100 good-paying IGT jobs in Rhode Island and making an annual salary guarantee that is equal to 250% of the minimum wage. That guarantee will likely grow to be over $85 million, the eventual adoption of $15 minimum. It's a substantial commitment on our part. Our partner Bally is committed to making major investments that will produce more demand to help Rhode Island's third largest source of revenue continue to recover and grow. Mark will deal with that and to go through the survey. They're very interesting views of what we can expect from this period. But in short, we remain steadfastly committed to completing this deal, which is at its heart one of the largest economic development packages put forth in recent history. At the same time, I must also tell you there's a real sense of urgency about these discussions. One of the major areas of cost savings we are pursuing is our real estate footprint. There's a major effort underway at IGT to reduce and consolidate our local presence. And just to give you a sense of that, our two major facilities in Nevada, our gaming headquarters in Las Vegas, and 1 million square foot office manufacturing facility in Rhode, are currently on the market. It's notable that the Reno facility is where legacy IGT began. That same kind of activity is going on across the globe. We have a footprint of over 147 properties that we're actively trying to reduce and consolidate. We should add, we're not leaving Nevada, but we are consolidating our presence substantially. Rhode Island has been fortunate in that our presence here has been directly tied to government campus. As we consider this legislation, I encourage you to keep in mind that as a company, we continue to move forward and manage our business to the reality of the economy. passing this legislation, but thereby eliminating uncertainty about our future relationship with the technology Pacific presence in the island, and the same pressures that are impacting the rest of our business. As you see in my Nevada example, everything is on the table. But as I said earlier, I want to emphasize, we are encouraged by the seriousness and priority we have given this bill. As I said, what you have before you is a forward-looking plan. I firmly believe that to protect and grow Rhode Island's third largest regular traffic IGT leader, a leader in global gaming. We're now Bally's been a leading casino operator. And I might add that IGT and its predecessor VLTs is really the state's most successful high-tech startup. And all of this will be here for the foreseeable future if this legislation. There have been lots of compromises that Sharon has talked about over the history of the vote. That's the job of going through all that. We've made those compromises to get us to this point, and I believe the agreement is the better forward. Major investments we made, we've been paying jobs to be guaranteed. And please appreciate that we at IGT don't offer that kind of guarantee anywhere else in the world. Any other contract, even many contracts that are as meaningful and more than and as we've said in the past, and Jay will go through, there will be technology infrastructure for a lot of the is and will remain state of the art. All of this in the state will be better able to maintain and advance its leadership position in a very challenging market. With better facilities and machine program that is aligned with all parties. Let's sort one into that. And you all recall that we came together with Twin River at the time about to devise a program that made sense not only for us, but for the state of Rhode Island. I think we're on the right track. I'm firmly of the belief, and I've said this before, but I'll emphasize it again, the legislation before you is a way forward for state-sponsored bills in Rhode Island. It really has foresight. Enhance the competitive position, do a good job, strict new partnerships that fill in line with the state, Twin River, and now in IGT. Again, I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to go through a lengthy description of who IGT is. We've done that in the past, and I think, again, I will encourage you, the members to look at the video we put together. I think it's insightful and a nice way encapsulates what we think the issues are, what we think the opportunities here for the state. With that, I'll turn it over now to Mark, who frankly can take some time to your school country because they're excited about the growth we're seeing with Bally's and the future it has, and now one more meeting just to allow Mark.
Thanks, Bob. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of House Finance. Thanks once again for allowing us to provide testimony in support of House Bill 5223. This is economic development legislation. It provides the necessary and critical framework to help.
I think we're making an adjustment on the sound.
Yeah, can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, we can. We're making an adjustment on our end. You're coming through loud and clear, Mark.
Excellent. Tell me if I'm too loud, okay? I just want to make sure you can hear me. And I'm trying not to talk with my hands, but also I'm keeping them under the desk.
Your friends are saying just a tad too loud, but you're okay.
Okay, thanks. Look, this is... the world has changed so dramatically in the last year. I just want to take a minute to quickly introduce the company and then come back to the purposes of this legislation. So many of you knew us as Twin River. We were a small Rhode Island-based operator. We had 4 casinos in 3 states, but we have recently transformed the company. We're now Bally's, and we now have 15 casinos in 11 states. And we've created another major dimension to the company. So we're acquiring a national sports betting technology company. We're acquiring the third largest daily fantasy sports company, and we're acquiring other gaming assets that are going to allow us to grow nationally. We did a major media deal, which allows us to rename 19 regional sports networks around the country, from Fox Sports to Bally Sports. And now we're official sports betting partners of the NHL and the NBA. We have a lot more deals to come. Having said all of that, with all of that growth, we continue to want to focus on having our home be in Rhode Island. So talk about the legislation. Sharon kind of walked you through all the details, so I just want to kind of take a step back and give the committee a sense of the high level. We did talk about this before, but I think it's worthy of bringing it again. When we got to the stalemate at the end of 2019 and nothing was happening, actually the state legislature brought us together with IGT and Twin River and really wanted us to cut a deal. And in those negotiations, the state identified its top 3 priorities. And it was very straightforward. It was jobs and economic development. The state wanted to solve the machines to protect and enhance the $300 million a year the state makes off the VLTs, and it wanted to eliminate risk on systems and technologies. IGT is a global leader. They wanted to stay with IGT on the systems. They wanted to avoid another UHIP situation. Those were their 3 things that were really important to the state. And they've all made their way into this legislation, either with new terms or improved terms. So let's start first with economic development and jobs. So on the economic development piece, right, there are 2 companies here, large employers in Rhode Island, that are committing to invest $250 million into the Rhode Island economy. It also provides an important boost to the city of Providence. And Mr. Chairman, you mentioned this earlier. IGT is obligated to stay at 10 Memorial Boulevard, and we're obligated to maintain our corporate headquarters in Providence through a 12,000 square foot facility. And a signature element of the economic development is that we're going to do a 50,000 square foot expansion to our flagship Rhode Island property, Twin River Casino Hotel in Lincoln. So this project, it has a 40,000 square foot expansion to the gaming floor and a 10,000 square foot expansion near the hotel to build a spa. Just so it's clear, this is built entirely by a union workforce. Now, we've provided some materials to you. You should have received them. It looks something like this. I just want to walk through those slides a little bit if people have them in front of you, because it'll give you kind of a better sense about what this project is all about. If you look at page 2 in the presentation, it shows the yellow 40,000 square foot addition right in the middle of the page. So that's the expansion to the gaming floor. Right above it, you can see the 10,000 square foot addition to the hotel. That allows us to create a 14,000 square foot luxury spa. If you flip to page 3, it just gives you a little more detail on the expansion to the gaming floor. So we think this is essential to our ability to compete more effectively with Massachusetts and Connecticut. You can see the orange area on the left. That's a series of new Asian-themed restaurants. And then sprinkled throughout, you can see the new tables, you can see the new slot machines, all sorts of additional amenities. If you take a look at page 4, you can see, you can get a feel for the finishes that we're proposing. This is going to be a high-end luxury experience. We're particularly excited about the water feature that you can see on the left side of the page. And obviously, what we're trying to do is put ourselves in a position better able to replicate the experiences people are getting in Massachusetts and Connecticut. Page 5 shows you a new high-limit area that we're going to build and operate, again, increasing our competitiveness, especially with the higher-end players. If you look at page 6, it just gives you a feel for the layout of the 14,000 square foot spa. We're going to have all cutting-edge amenities and services. In addition to all of that, the spa is going to have its own dedicated restaurant and easy access from the hotel lobby. So if you look at pages 7 and 8, it just gives you a feel for the finishes we're going to use. We expect this to quickly become one of the top spas in the region and to be able to drive additional performance through the gaming operations. On page 9, which is the last page of this section, it just shows the second floor of our casino. One of the kind of hidden benefits of what we're doing here is by adding the new 40,000 square foot space on the first floor of the casino, it frees up our second floor. We don't need additional gaming on the second floor, so now that's available for other forms of entertainment amenities. Once we finish the first floor, we'll then decide what we're putting in the second floor, but our goal is to create a compelling destination and entertainment experience for our guests. So as I mentioned, this is a full union project. There'll be approximately 20 construction trades involved. We've received all the approvals we need from the town of Lincoln, and we're ready to start construction shortly after this legislation passes, if it passes. We know the unions are hungry for this project to start, and so are we. We all want to put people back to work in Rhode Island. This is a 14-month construction project, and if the legislation were to pass in April, we could start construction in June and hopefully have the space open by the 4th of July in 2022. You have to remember the state here, as Sharon showed with all the different numbers, the state's essentially the majority partner in this enterprise. Opening this expansion will drive revenues for the state of Rhode Island. If it were able to deliver just a 3 to 5% increase in VLTs alone, just as an example, on a pre-COVID basis, that's worth $9 to $15 million a year of incremental better performance for the state. $1 million a month. So every month we wait, we delay not only putting people to work on the construction, but we delay our ability to open it to improve performance. And with some of the restrictions that we've had to live with in the past several months, we've been in the process of losing a lot of customers to Massachusetts and Connecticut. We have to do everything we can to get those customers back. So as I indicated, the first state priority was jobs and economic development. So I've just talked about the economic development piece. Now let's talk about the jobs. It's already been well covered. It's the 1,100 IGT jobs. It's 100 new. It's our 30 new headquarters jobs within 24 months. Everyone's already discussed the fact that it's not only each individual job is 150% of minimum wage, but in the aggregate, it's 250% of minimum wage. So remember, at a $15 minimum wage, that means IGT's guaranteed payroll alone is $85 million. There are consequences if those levels aren't met. I think that's already been covered. So that was the first state priority, jobs and economic development. So the second state priority was to fix the machines. And for those of you that have been here for all the hearings over the last 2 years, and I've always said the machines are the most important thing. It's where all of the economics are out of the gaming program in the state. It's the thing that we have to make sure we get right. It also drives our ability to compete. And remember, as the operating partner for the state, the Rhode Island taxpayers and Twin River are fully aligned on this particular issue. We make money the same way, and we have the exact same interest in making sure we have the best, most competitive machines. So remember, taking a look at the numbers that Sharon showed, the state on a non-COVID year makes $300 million a year through the machines. Okay, it's almost 80% of the entire lottery and gaming revenue stream for the state. So how did we solve this? It's the most important aspect of this deal from my perspective. And that is that IGT and Twin River will form a joint venture. The joint venture provides all of the VLTs, and there's a tremendous amount of competition embedded in this. So for those people that want to say that this is a no-bid deal, this is actually set up exactly to make sure we have competition by the machine manufacturers for the entire term of this agreement. IGT is limited to 40% of the machines, as Sharon pointed out, and there'll be at least 5 other companies that provide the remaining 60%. And then those companies compete with IGT every single day. It's actually the first quarter of the year to see who performs. Those that perform better get more machines and earn more money. Those that perform worse lose machines and get less money. So it's competition. It's exactly what we need. It's the founding principle of the VLT program, and it's honored here in this deal. Okay, so I just want to point out as well, this is always controlled ultimately by the Rhode Island Lottery. It maintains all oversight in gaming, and ultimately it gets to make all decisions because constitutionally our program has to be state operated. So those are the top 2 priorities, right? Jobs and economic development, and then the machines. The third priority was for the state to ensure it had a seamless operation of technology and systems. They did not want to take the risk of a quick transition, of conversion risk. They wanted to avoid UHIP in entirety. And that was the easiest part to solve because IGT is the world leader in systems and technology. And keeping them on provided continuity. It ensures no disruption of service. And it makes sure that there's no conversion risk here. By minimizing risk, keeping IGT in, it provided the state an absolutely seamless transition. The contract itself is actually more like 2 10-year contracts. where IGT has to turn over all technology, and then in another 10 years, it turns it all over again. So those were the three primary objectives that the state had in trying to make sure that this legislation met its needs. I just want to address a few other outstanding items that have come up in the past. So one is this report by Christensen Capital Advisors, and I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but if people have any questions, feel free, and I'm always available. I just want to remind everyone, it reviewed the old deal and not this one. It doesn't ascribe any value whatsoever to the economic development or jobs elements of this deal. It doesn't factor in how the expansion of the facility will improve performance. Remember, if we can deliver a 5% improvement on performance through the VLTs by our expansion and investment, that translates into $15 million a year for the Rhode Island state taxpayers. This report simply doesn't apply to this legislation. There have been some others who have taken a look at the report and said, based on the report, the state should actually look at buying instead of leasing the machines. And well, I think it's a well-intentioned idea. I think it's really bad. It's certainly something we as the operator would never support. We think it would really hurt our ability to compete, and we think it would really hurt the Rhode Island taxpayers. And let me just give you a few examples why. Look, the basic calculation was that the state of Rhode Island would only have to spend $200 million to buy machines over 20 years. It pays a lot more under the 7%, and therefore the state could save hundreds of millions of dollars. The problem is, it won't cost the state $200 million to buy the machines. It will cost them over $500 million. And that estimate it's missing $300 million worth of expense. The price is wrong, didn't adjust for inflation, it didn't include all of the other elements, it didn't include premium games. I could go on and on and on. If people have questions, I'm happy to do it. But it's missing just hundreds of millions of dollars of actual expense that are embedded in the program and that are embedded in this legislation right here in terms of requirements. So, it's the other thing that the report doesn't take a look at is it doesn't assume if the state takes over the machines, what happens if performance drops, right? If the state can do it 95 as well as private industry can do, and only has a 5% dip, the state loses $5 million a year on the VLTs. That's the magnitude of losses that can be caused by not doing this properly. And there are so many other significant problems with having the state own the machines. It's the annual budget issues. It's affecting our ability to compete. What do you do with the underperforming machines? That's the reason why no state in the country does it this way in a VLT program. Now, one state actually tried, Maryland. They did it. They said the state can save a lot of money by buying the machines instead of leasing them. They implemented it, and it was a terrible failure. Costs were higher than expected. Revenues were lower. Performance wasn't there. The state didn't know how to handle all the problems with the machines. And the net effect, they undid it. They stopped it because they just realized it wasn't working. So that's the Christensen report. And of course, if people have questions, you can always let me know. Feel free. There's one other thing I want to just talk about. And Leader Filippi, you asked a few questions. I wanted to just try and address them very quickly. One was on the sale leaseback provision. So we are, first of all, we have no current plans of doing a sale leaseback, but it's a long-term deal. If we were to do one, the partner we did it with has to be separately licensed by the state. Okay, and the restriction is that we had to use the proceeds only to pay down debt or for some other purpose that the state of Rhode Island approves. It's not limited just to debt in Rhode Island because our debt obligations aren't limited to just debt in Rhode Island. So the state has asserted that it has an interest in our debt all around the country. And so as a result of that, if we were given the approval by the state to do a sale leaseback transaction, we would be allowed to address debt all around the country. You also asked about free play, a very important question on free play. This legislation makes it crystal clear that anyone who has a percentage interest in the revenue stream has its fair share on free play. The other thing this legislation does, which is absolutely essential, is it provides protection against losses caused by COVID. So what free play allows us to do is to compete with the Massachusetts and Connecticut casinos, who essentially send out a coupon to players in Rhode Island that says, come play, you get $50 of free play on the slots. That's what we're talking about. So people get those coupons, and so we like to be able to match those coupons in our facilities. We all benefit from it. However, because of COVID, the amount of free play is tied to the prior year's actual performance. And so we would have less than half of the ability, or around half of the level of promotional ability that we need to be competitive because of COVID. So what this legislation does is it ties it to the last full year of operations, essentially. So before I close, I just want to comment on one other thing that's in your packet. You'll see there are a whole bunch of letters of support that are attached here. We could have sent in hundreds. We didn't want to do that, but I want to just highlight just kind of the first 7 letters. It's a real broad-based level of support that we have here. So it's from the town of Lincoln that wants this project to get built, drive tax revenues, and drive performance to the town. It's the AFL-CIO, the Rhode Island Building Trades, the Northern Rhode Island Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce, the Blackstone Valley Tourism Council, and the Greater Newport Chamber of Commerce. All of those organizations and the town submitted letters of support for this legislation. And then there are another almost 20 letters or so just from businesses that we work with in the state, large and small, that are recognizing the economic contribution that we make and are supportive of the legislation. Look, Rhode Island has an unfortunate history when it comes to recessions. We're usually the first in and the last out. This legislation enables hundreds of millions of investment and helps support the employment of thousands of Rhode Islanders. And it couldn't come at a better time. The pandemic has had a devastating effect on the Rhode Island economy. We need the jobs and investment to help this economy come out stronger than ever. Despite all of the current challenges, we remain optimistic about the future of our economy and our home state. I'll close simply by underscoring that both companies remain committed to this legislation even during this pandemic. And that's not an easy commitment to make. The economic realities have changed significantly in the last year. We've both experienced dramatic reductions in revenue. We're under performance pressure, yet we nevertheless believe in the future of Rhode Island, and we want to invest hundreds of millions into this economy. I now want to turn it over to our new VP of Government Relations, Elizabeth Sieber. She's well known to some of you. We're thrilled to have her on the team. These are the kind of hires that we want to make for our corporate headquarters here in Rhode Island. Right? She's now covering 25 states for us around the country. It's a great job. She's a great person to have on the team, and we feel really fortunate to have her. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Elizabeth, and you can take a minute to give the committee just a little bit of a sense of how we have an impact on the community.
Elizabeth, you're up.
All right.
There you are. Before you get started, Elizabeth, you're on. Before you get started, I just want to say to Mark, it was a great presentation. I know your unbelievable staff put it together for you, but the the information you gave was concise, it was to the point, and it was very helpful. So thanks for making sure it was like it was. We really enjoyed getting the information that you gave us. Okay, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
See if you can top that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. As you heard Mark say, my name is Elizabeth Sieber, and I'm happy to be appearing before you tonight in my new role here at Bally's as the Vice President of Government Relations. I want to take just a couple of minutes, because Mark touched on some of it, to talk to you about our community engagement. We take our responsibility to our municipal host communities of Lincoln and Tiverton, as well as the state of Rhode Island, very seriously. We work hard to ensure that we are a positive presence in the state of Rhode Island by working with the local communities, elected officials, organizations, and nonprofits. For example, over the last 5 years, we've donated over $1 million to over 1,500 local charities. Just looking at Lincoln, since that's where this project is going to take place, we've provided over $31,000 of support annually to Lincoln charities, such as the Lincoln Senior Center, the Lincoln Animal Shelter, scholarships at Lincoln High School, and Lincoln Adopt a Family Giving Tree program. We hold annual food drives, we offer event space at discounted rates for local nonprofits, and we hold 3 blood drives a year. You heard Mark reference some of the support that we've received from chambers of commerce. So we are very active participants in many chambers of commerce across the state and tourism boards, such as Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce, the Northern Rhode Island Chamber of Commerce, Blackstone Valley Tourism Council, Rhode Island Hospitality Association, Providence Warwick Convention and Visitors Bureau, and One South Coast Chamber. We also work with many local businesses, over 240 in 2019, with an economic impact that year of $26 million. So as Mark referenced, you'll have those letters of support And at the very back of those, you'll find that several of these businesses have drafted letters in support that you have before you because they want us to be able to expand and continue our investment in the state of Rhode Island. We also believe it's a very important thing for us to be a good neighbor to the residents of Lincoln and Tiverton. So we have a designated point of contact within the company to address any issues that arise from residents, as well as meet with local government officials to ensure that any issues are addressed quickly. And frankly, our accessibility and our outreach has really paid off in these communities. For example, we have not received any formal complaints at any of the hearings regarding Twin Rivers' potential expansion as described in this piece of legislation. As one of Rhode Island's largest employers with over 250 employees pre-pandemic between both properties, we want to ensure that we are seen as a valuable member of both Lincoln and Tiverton as well as the state of Rhode Island. We hope that you will support our continued community engagement in the state of Rhode Island by voting in the affirmative on this legislation. And with that, I would like to introduce Jay Gendron, the Chief Operating Officer of Lottery at IGT, to discuss IGT's commitments in this piece of legislation.
Welcome, Jay. Hi, Jay. You're up, young man. Jay, can you hear us? Jay? First of all, you're muted, but can you hear me? Oh. Okay, I'm not sure that.
Jay, would you like me to go next?
Yeah, why don't you go next, and we'll come back and get Jay. Because I don't think I can't hear him, and he can't hear us, I don't think. Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Can you hear me okay? Yep, thanks. All right, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the House Finance Committee. My name is Rachel Barber, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Gaming and Lottery at IGT. I'm a resident of South Kingstown, and my state representative is Blake Filippi. I'd like to thank you all once again for welcoming us and allowing us to provide our testimonies in support of House Bill 5223. In June of this year, I'll be celebrating 30 years with IGT. I began my career as a software engineer at GTech down in our West Greenwich facility, and I participated on more lottery and gaming startups and conversions than we have time to recount here today. When I first started at GTech, I didn't have a true appreciation for the fact that GTech was a global entity and a genuine leader in the industry. Over the last 30 years, I've come to learn not only that we are the best at what we do, despite our humble roots here in Rhode Island, but I've also come to learn why we're the best. Quite simply, we're the best because of our vast history and experience in this industry and because of the passion of our people. Evidence of this passion can be found, of course, from the countless testimonies that you all generously heard back in 2019. But these were only the Rhode Islanders. If you were to visit Nevada, Warsaw, Italy, or any other major IGT office, I can assure you that you would hear the same. What you would find is not only an overwhelming love of the company that we work for, but also a sincere dedication to all of our customers. Last year was clearly unprecedented for all of us. However, the technology organization that I have the pleasure of leading still managed to deliver over 1,000 deliveries to customers all around the world. In most of these cases, these projects needed to be delivered remotely. Our teams pivoted and managed to do what they always do, which is to make sure that we get it right. It's worth pointing out that our solutions also enjoy nearly 100% uptime. I bring this up only to emphasize once again that IGT is not just a local Rhode Island company, but that we are also a powerhouse in this industry. I would like to thank you for your time, and if you have any questions that I could answer, I'd be happy to do so. And next, I would like to introduce, I'm not sure actually if it's Kim or if it's back to Jay.
I think
Rachel, can you hear me?
now.
I can.
Okay, sorry about that. Mr. Chairman, okay if I proceed?
Yes, please, Jay. Go ahead.
Excellent, thank you. Good evening, Chairman Abdi and members of the committee. My name is Jay Gendron, and I am the Chief Operating Officer of Lottery at IGT. As a resident of East Greenwich, my state representative is Justine Caldwell from District 30, and I fully support House Bill 5223. Thank you for inviting me back to speak on behalf of IGT and for your consideration of this legislation. I am grateful for the opportunity to come back before you again to discuss the proposed contract. As many of you in the committee know, I am a lifelong Rhode Islander who grew up in Pawtucket, and I have known GTEC, now IGT, since I was 26 years old. My responsibilities at IGT are to operate, grow, and maintain our lottery business around the globe. In the United States, we are the primary lottery terminal and central system provider for 25 states, including 8 of the 10 top lotteries in terms of gross sales. Today, roughly 75% of all lottery transactions in the United States pass through our technology infrastructure. Since I first testified before the committee on October 3rd, 2019, the legislation has evolved to strengthen our potential 20-year agreement with the state. Make no mistake, this legislation has always placed the interests of the state first to preserve the key economic drivers in Rhode Island: jobs, tax revenue, and economic development. There have been changes in Rhode Island since October 2019 as well. We have a new governor, we have a new Speaker of the House, new General Assembly members. We've been experiencing the devastating impacts of the pandemic. IGT and Bally are now partners in Rhode Island, and Tom Brady won a Super Bowl with Tampa Bay. Like I said, a lot has changed, but one thing has not, and that is IGT's unwavering commitment to the state of Rhode Island. This legislation will ensure that IGT maintains its offices in Providence. We are committing to maintain 1,100 jobs in the state and strengthen that commitment by including an aggregate payroll guarantee of 250% of the minimum wage. And IGT stands remain committed to this despite the effects of the pandemic on our business around the globe. This agreement is like no other in the lottery and gaming industry. There is no state that requires a commitment of 1,100 jobs as part of its contract for lottery or gaming products and services. Under this bill, IGT and Bally are required to make an investment of $250 million with an upfront payment of $25 million in license fees. The proposed contract is essentially 2 10-year contracts with a complete technology refresh by IGT in year 10. A refresh that will help the state's gaming and lottery programs remain competitive in a region where a variety of expanded gaming is being considered by both Massachusetts and Connecticut. Today, the Rhode Island Lottery has a network of 1,250 lottery terminals at retail establishments around the state, along with 300 self-service vending machines. Those retailers, like gas stations, restaurants, and convenience stores, sell traditional lottery products from Keno and Powerball to instant scratch tickets. Those terminals communicate via satellite and cellular technology with a central computing system at our 2 in-state data centers. We have been providing quality products and technology to the Rhode Island Lottery since its inception in 1974. IGT has always offered the state fair market value for this infrastructure, and in the last decade, those lottery and VLT systems have been operational in excess of 99.9% of the time. A track record that has protected state revenue for decades. There has also been some inaccurate characterizations of the instant ticket printing contract IGT has with the Rhode Island Lottery. IGT has been the primary instant ticket printer since fiscal year 2017. In fiscal 20, the lottery's instant sales reached 112 million, resulting in a compound annual growth rate of 6%. To put this in context, IGT is growing instant sales at the lottery at a rate that is 3 times greater than the previous printer of scratch tickets, Scientific Games. If the Rhode Island Lottery is losing instant ticket sales to Massachusetts, as reported by the Christensen Capital Advisors in their evaluation from January 2020, it is likely due to the payout rates, which are substantially different between Rhode Island and Massachusetts. IGT's job is twofold at Lincoln and Tiverton. First, we supply the central monitoring system for the VLTs at both facilities, which tracks every transaction on every VLT and ensures the machines are working properly and that none of the machines are compromised to preserve their integrity and security. Second, IGT is a technology and service provider of the VLTs at both properties. In Rhode Island, unlike most commercial casinos, the cost of the machine is borne by the technology provider and not the operator, who in this case is the state of Rhode Island. On this same front, we have now partnered with Bally's to strengthen the offerings at both facilities. Effective January 1st, 2023, IGT and Bally's will form a joint venture to maintain a competitive gaming machine offering in Lincoln and Tiverton. The companies will make various investments, resulting in IGT controlling a 60% stake in the joint venture and Bally's owning the remaining 40% of the entity. This joint venture will ensure the two gaming floors and its slot machines continue to drive more than $300 million a year in revenue to the state. As you can see, the products, services, and technology that IGT brings to bear on lottery and gaming in Rhode Island are both state-of-the-art and complex. This is a fair agreement for all parties, IGT, Bally's, and the state. This economic development proposal adds more investment and value than what could be achieved through a competitive bidding process. The legislation will ensure the state's overall gaming competitiveness with neighboring states by providing a roadmap for the future and protecting its third largest source of revenue. And last but not least, the bill has been dramatically improved since it was first introduced in 2019, securing additional economic development benefits for Rhode Island while introducing many important protections for our state's taxpayers. I want to thank you for considering this legislation and listening to me this evening. I hope that I can answer any questions that you may have about this legislation and the proposed contract. And now I will turn it over to Kim Lee.
Thank you, Jay. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the House Finance Committee. My name is Kim Barker Lee, and I am the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion at IGT. I appreciate the opportunity to come back before you to offer testimony in support of this bill. My state rep is Arthur Handy from District 18. This year on Valentine's Day, I celebrated my 10-year anniversary at IGT. This is the longest period that I have spent at any one company, and I really do hope I can join the 30-year club with Rachel. In 2017, I moved to Rhode Island from Chicago to lead IGT's Global Office of Diversity and Inclusion. I am blessed that I did not have to make that move alone. I live in the Edgewood neighborhood in Cranston with my husband, Mo, who's a 7th and 8th grade math instructor at Blackstone Valley Prep Junior High School. And my son, Maurice Jr., is a 2020 graduate of the Prout School who will be starting college here in New England this fall. I've been embraced by my new home state with open arms, and quite honestly, if you count 2020, my 3.5 years here in Rhode Island actually feel more like 10 good years. At IGT, our diversity and inclusion goals are actually quite simple: to ensure our people reflect the diversity of our customers and players, to maintain a culture that is inclusive, and to ensure that a sense of belonging, meaning being a part of something greater than yourself, is a given for each and every one of our employees, regardless of identity, position in the company, language, or geographic location, excuse me. Part of our diversity and inclusion strategy has been to form employee-led networks that we call diversity and inclusion groups, or DIGs. Groups like Super Abilities, Pride with IGT, greater than 50, military veterans at IGT, and Win with IGT, our award-winning Women's Inclusion Network. However, what distinguishes IGT from some companies who talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion is that we do not check boxes. Our leaders stand up and in front of our commitment to diversity and inclusion, including all of my colleagues testifying before you today. Bob Vincent helped lead our initial D&I efforts and was instrumental in helping to create my role. Rachel Barber is the executive sponsor of Greater Than 50. And Jay Gendron is the executive sponsor of ACE at IGT, a group that is focused on the experiences and needs of Black employees. That group launched in August in the midst of a very public discourse and unrest about race and racism globally. And quite honestly, at IGT, we did not shy away from the opportunity to provide a platform for authentic conversations about these difficult topics, because we knew that as a company, we did not check D&I boxes. We've been doing the work, we built trust, and we've been committed to change. As someone who is new to this state, it is refreshing to be part of a professional and business community that is open to leading edge business initiatives and strong employee programs. Our company joins others here in Rhode Island that believes that diverse and inclusive companies draw its talent from its communities and contributes to ways that benefits us all. And we look forward to the opportunity to continue to do that here in Rhode Island. Thank you. I'm going to take this back to my colleague, Bob.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
That is the presentation we had planned for this evening, knowing that there would likely be questions. And I hope we can do our best to answer them. I think you hopefully get a sense of the excitement, commitment that remains despite all the difficult times of the past year. We stand ready to follow through on this deal and do so, I think, in a way that will be of tremendous benefit to the state of Rhode Island. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Before we get to those, I've got a couple of people that are witnesses that are on the phone. I think it's just two. And if the clerk could get them on the line, we can get that business done, and then we can launch into our questions. While he's working on that, this presentation has a lot of information in it, and it is in fact on our website. So if people want to see the letters of support that were written, please go to the website. The Finance Committee is part of the House of Representatives website, and you'll see this there. Also, we had a number of people who signed up to say they supported it, but after we get off the phone, then we'll do that. So we want to get to our first call. Is John on the line, please? John, you're on the line, sir.
So we want to get to our first call. Is John on the line, please? John, you're on the line, sir.
Yes,
John,
Mr. Chairman. How are you tonight?
I'm doing well, John. Could you turn your TV down, please? Because I hear myself in your house.
That's all right. I'd like to have you come over my house, sir.
Okay, thanks. Give us your brief comments, please, John.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is John Tassoni, former state senator, and now I am the chairman of the board for the Rhode Island Problem Gambling Association here in Rhode Island. I wanted to give you a brief overview of the board. The brief overview would be the Rhode Island State Police, Johnson & Wales, United Way, Probation, Department of Corrections, IGT, and the Attorney General's office. And there's a few others in there. The reason for my call, Mr. Chairman, is to bring awareness to problem gambling. There is no monies available for problem gambling as far as education and prevention. In Massachusetts, their board gets $2.1 million for staff of 10. New York is $1.35 million, and Delaware is $1.38 million. Similar sizes to Rhode Island is Nebraska, $240,000, and Minnesota, $400,000, and New Mexico is $850,000. With that being said, Mr. Chairman, we're looking to get some funding in this piece of legislation so our board can survive and go out and do prevention and education in our high schools and in our colleges and the community. Right now, when we had the app, which has been placed on for people to go and to gamble on the app, we're finding out that we have high school students running businesses right out of the high schools because at the age of 18, you can now download the app and go into the schools and they're running the little businesses. Because of COVID, we haven't been able to go out and get into the schools or the colleges, but obviously that hopefully will be resolved relatively soon. We were much lucky to get a grant from the Rhode Island Foundation to start this program up and running. But after Rhode Island Foundation money is gone, we will no longer have any funding to go out and do education and prevention. We are a group of people who want to see gambling move forward. We are a group of people that we need to be careful about gambling and our young people getting involved in situations where they can't get out of. So what we're currently asking for is to be put in the budget of the legislation that's for you, so we can go out and do the things that we need to do. None of our board members are paid positions.
Thank you very much for your comments, John. We'll take that into consideration. I think you testified before us last year, I believe, but thank you so much for all that you do. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity.
You're quite welcome, sir. Okay, we're trying to get Paul on the line now. Paul is unavailable? Okay, thank you. Then that takes care of those who were on the phone line for us at this point. What I'm going to do for just a second or two is I do have a list of people who signed up, and so I think these are all in support, but I'll read their names. Elena Goodingson, Alan Peters, Allison Mitchell, Andrew Mullen, Bev Tech, Blackstone Valley, Candace McLone, Central Nurseries, Christine Kelly, Cranston Enterprise, David Kawasnowski, Debbie Raymond, Dirk Abney von Badajokes, and Donna Pesolo, Dunkin' Donuts, and Edwin Gilbert. And I'll get a few more as we get down the line. So I also want to mention that we do have, just in case, our division of the lottery, Rhode Island's division of lottery on the line or here, and Mark Ferkalo is available. So if people have questions for those, we'll get to that. But I want to make sure now that there are no questions or whatever questions you had for the panel that was before that, then we'll go through that. And remember, these are supposed to be questions that get us information. And one of the reasons is that more likely than not, on March 18th, we'll be back again discussing this issue with another perspective. So everybody's going to get a chance to get their questions in. But for now, it's a matter of trying to get information that would be helpful. If we get off topic, off subject, I'll gently try to get us back on so that we can get this hearing done in a good way, in a friendly way, and get some information we need. So I saw two hands go up first. Actually, Rep Diaz is number one. She did get me before.
She's number one in my book too, Chairman, please.
Yeah, I know. She's number one in everybody's book. Rep Diaz has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's so great to be around nice gentlemen in this committee, so I appreciate that a lot, leader. Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask question to Mark, if you don't mind, if he's available.
If Mark is still available, I'm looking at him now. Mark, you've got a good question.
I'm available.
Coming to you. Okay.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
During your presentation, Mark, you mentioned the word jobs, jobs, jobs. And when I heard that, I feel very happy. So the first question in relation to jobs is about the addition that this project is making to the building. I would like to ask if you have any idea or percentage of the project was assigned to minority company in Rhode Island.
So it is something that we're trying to focus on. We're setting a goal for the construction project of 15% of all construction spend going to MBE and DBE, minority and disadvantaged businesses. We'll have to see what the supply is of services available for that, but it's something we're focused on. And we'd be happy to report back. There are significant reporting obligations on us under Section 14 of this legislation, and we'd be happy to come back and report to you after the construction is done and even midway if it would be helpful, just so you can get a sense of how we're living up to that commitment.
Are you working with Dorinda Nee from the Administration Building and Minority Business Enterprise of the state?
I would have to check with my team to see if they are, but I would be happy to do that. And if we're not already, I'll be happy to make the connection.
In reference to jobs, I have another question. As you presented to this project to us today, I would also like to know what is the plan to hire more minority employees after the project is done. I'm looking to see if we create more opportunity for working family, people of color, low income, those individuals who are hit the most from the COVID pandemic.
Yeah, it's something that's very important to us, and you'll get a handle on how we're trying to look at this company-wide from some announcements we make in the next month or so. We've also started very serious discussions with the Community College of Rhode Island to try and focus on how it is that we can provide internships, job training programs, and a pathway to better paying jobs for people, for their students and for adults that may have some relationship to the school. It's something that's very important to us, and I'd be happy to talk to you about it offline if that would be helpful.
Thank you, thank you, Mark. That is music to my ears. I will keep my ears open to any information that may come from you. Thank you.
Certainly.
She will be waiting for a lot of information that will come from you, Mark. So keep your head tight, young man. Okay. Leader Felipe, you had some questions, please.
Yes. Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you to the panel. Mr. Christofouli had commented that the Christian Capital Advisor report is no longer relevant because of the economic development aspects of the deal. And I don't know that those economic development aspects were really central to Christian Capital Advisor's report other than the initial upfront payment. Mr. Christofouli, could you maybe dig into that a little bit and explain how CCA's report is no longer relevant for reasons other than the economic development portions, which it really just didn't deal with?
Yeah, I think I got your question, Leader Filippi, but if I don't address it, please just let me go again. It was a little hard to hear from you. So the problem with the Christensen report relating to economic development is it doesn't take into account any of the other benefits to the state or to the performance of the facility from the economic development investment. So top of the list is the fact that we're doing a major expansion.
So, sorry, the
question was
other than the economic development, other than the economic development portions, which the CCA report did not focus on, the fundamentals about the gaming industry that the CCA report touched on, specifically the VLTs leasing versus buying, the central management system, the instant tickets, and the 20-year term, those fundamentals about the industry that the CCA report discussed in depth and offered its opinion on, how have those changed by the terms of this agreement, not the economic development portion?
Okay, so you don't want to talk about economic. So there are a couple of things on the report then I think are worthy of mention. First of all, I already covered the own versus lease. The own model does not work, and I explained why.
I'm sorry, I'm just not being clear. I'm sorry. So yeah. It's in terms of what has changed that now makes the CCA, we'll get into the details of the CCA report and how we each feel about it, and I'm sure we might not agree on that, but what fundamentals of the deal have changed which renders the CCA report irrelevant at this point? That's what I'm trying to understand. Or is it still relevant?
No, what I'm saying is the reason I said it was irrelevant was because it doesn't take into account the economic development. So you're separating that out. I understand that, but that was a big reason why it's not relevant. There are several other parts of the deal. You want to exclude them because you're saying exclude economic development. But if it wants to take a look at the costs and benefits of a deal like this to the state, it has to include all of those other provisions, including the investment and what that does for performance. In the way it looks at the VLTs, it doesn't look at the risk of performance by having the state take them over, which is material. It does admit actually that Maryland is an instructive example for the state. And remember, Maryland
I
canceled
understand.
it.
I'm just not asking the right question. I'm sorry. It was really what terms of the deal render the not. So we can get into the analysis in the report, but what terms of this new deal render that report no longer applicable? So we understand the economic development portion was never really part of the analysis. So what fundamentals of the deal have changed such that the CCA report no longer is something that can inform the deliberations of this committee? And we can get into whether the report is wrong or right, but the actual deal, the new piece of legislation, is what I'm talking about. How does it differ in such a material respect that the CCA report is no longer relevant?
I keep trying to answer the question, and you just keep asking it the same way, and I just don't understand what you're looking for me to say. The economic development part is a big part of this. The rest of the deal is there. In the work that they did, they didn't talk to us about what kind of VLTs we need to be competitive, things of that nature. So it's a flawed premise to begin with. So I don't understand how I'm supposed to talk about the changes to the legislation. I fundamentally disagree with the report to begin with. So It's not just the changes in the legislation that make it irrelevant. The report wasn't done in the right manner. It doesn't really provide the kind of information that I think is required to be helpful to the committee.
Okay, let's get into some of the things in the report then, specifically the VLTs, leasing versus buying.
Leader, we are going to go deeper into the report. I think at a time. So
I'm going to ask these questions, Chairman, because they're important, and I think we need clarification.
No, the questions are important, but let's not badger.
No, we're not badgering anybody. We just don't have a lot of time, and so I want to be specific and clear and to the point. So, in terms of leasing versus buying, can you respond to Christensen's statement in his report that a 10% replacement per year of machines is the minimum to make a leasing relationship beneficial to the consumer?
Yeah, that's actually not what it says, Leader. It says more like 8% is relevant. It does talk about 10%, but then when it looks at the practical experiences, it says 8% is probably an acceptable level. When it talks about the purchase of VLTs, it also said it's a strong technical proposal, what we have here. But remember, in this legislation and some of the changes that happen, we're doing a 6% annual replacement cycle plus 2% through the joint venture, which gets you to 8%. We've got 5% of premium games, which get turned over very frequently. There's 2% of game conversions, and then up to another 5% based on efficiency. So it's significantly better, depending upon performance, than the 10% that's mentioned in there. But again, I would point you to the language where they say 8% is more likely a reasonable landing point.
And can you explain, I know you and I discussed this offline, and just for the benefit of the committee, why, if 8%, the joint venture is bringing the 6% in the legislation up to 8%. So the legislation says 6%, the joint venture says 8%. Why we wouldn't put 8% in our legislation? An 8%.
Yeah, because there are. Jay, you might want to mute your phone. I'm sorry, I'm getting some feedback. So, Leader Filippi, the reason we set it up that way is the legislation was already at 6%. That's the minimum annual that has to happen every single year. We thought, as Twin River, we needed to have more replacement than that. So in our contractual agreements, it's set at 8%. But the reason we didn't just propose to change the legislation to 8% in any given year was because we want to have some flexibility around market conditions and other factors where in any given year we can do more than 8% or less than 8%. It always has to be at least 6%. But for example, if a casino opened across the border in Fall River, that might be a year where we want to borrow against future years. It's always going to be 6% a year, but we might take 3 years worth of that 2% to do something to really compete effectively. The converse, in 1 year, there might be a year where we're doing really well, we've got all the right product, and the following year there is a new series of products coming out, and so we only want to do 6% that year so we can do 10% the following year. You have to remember, we're in an intensely competitive environment, and we're trying to set it up to make sure we have the best products that we need to compete. And it's very hard to put it on an exact, precise schedule. So a 6% minimum with an 8% contractual, we thought was the best balance of those competing interests to make sure we have all of the right products that we need to compete.
Thank you. Maybe the committee can look at rolling forward, saying a minimum of 6, but average 8% per year. So if 1 year they do 6, then next year they would have to do 10%. Before we move on, I just want to read a quote for the committee's benefit from page 31 of the CCA report. In order to take advantage of the leasing relationship, the casino leasing machines need to be replaced or convert more machines than the 10% annum industry standard. If you are replacing less than that, you negate the advantage provided from leasing. I want to move on to the central management system because, yeah, as you know, Mr. Christofouli, we've been trying to wrap our hands around on what the premium is that the state is paying in order to have these companies agree to the jobs guarantee. Back in, I think, of November or October of 2019, you pegged the premium at $300 million a year in overpayments above what the state could realize if it went to the market. We had exchanged some letters this year that all reps and senators were CC'd on. We had pegged it at $660 million, and you had stated that we were off by $200 million. So that kind of puts us at maybe $460 million of overpayments over the life of this contract. Mr. Christofouli, what are the overpayments that the state is making in order to realize these job guarantees?
So, look, I can go into the numbers a little more. You're off by at least $300 million on the purchase versus lease discussion. So we've already talked about that at length. I can give you the categories if you want. For example, you fail to include the right purchase price. If it's $25,000 instead of $20,000, that would be worth over $62 million over the term. You didn't include inflation. That's worth another $25 million at least. It didn't include premium units. That's critically important. And if you look at the CCA report, it goes over premium units in detail. It says how expensive they are, but how valuable they are. We don't have any obligation for premium units today. Under this deal, we get 5% premium units. Really important for our ability to compete. But that's over $130 million worth of expense that you didn't include in the purchase versus own buy. We can go on and on. It didn't include the game conversions. That's another $6 million. It didn't include the marketing contributions that the vendors make. That's another $21 million. It didn't include the staff that would be required for the state to do all of this. And again, that doesn't factor at all into how it is that you take a look at all of the costs that we're missing out of that. And that doesn't take into account the risk. On the other areas, Christensen itself took a look at the lottery system side and said it's only slightly below market, right? And you take a look at it and you add in the $25 million and that helped. And then it gave some comparison on the central system, but it admitted that the central system in Rhode Island has significantly more requirements than other states do of comparable size. And look, those are questions that are better addressed to the state or to IGT. I made my arguments on those and I understand where we're coming out. And the state has said very clearly that it doesn't want to take the risk of those conversions in technology, especially with the very short window that now exists before when these expire in June of 2023.
So when the CCA report says that we're overpaying on the central management system significantly, I believe it's around $140 million, do you dispute that? Because in a letter that you wrote to me, you didn't dispute it. The letter that you and Mr. Gendron wrote back in July of 2020.
So I'll let Jay address that question. But before we do, there's just one other point that I want to make about what you asked earlier, Leader Filippi, and that was related to the levels of investment here. It's not just the $150 million. Remember, the annual payrolls that are getting committed to the state here are about $100 million a year. Over 20 years, that's $2 billion worth of payroll. Okay, and when you take into account some portion of that is discretionary, there's over $30 million a year in taxes paid just off of that. It's really significant. But I'll turn it over to Jay so he can address the central
Professor
system.
Tabaldi's report, from Bryant? Is that the report from Bryant you're citing?
I believe the source may have been the report from Bryant, but I'm not sure.
And so
I can
the
check
total taxes that the state takes from the jobs is about $30 million a year?
I think the $30 million a year is the jobs plus all of the other taxes that are paid, property taxes, things of that nature.
So okay, yeah, I'm trying to wrap since you went to the jobs, I have here from Professor Tabaldi's report that it's about $23,545 in annual taxes per job. Is that accurate? Anybody? Hello? Are they still with us?
I think I think they're still with us. That's true. Yeah. But if you can't answer the question, then we will just drive on. And I'm going to say again, I'm allowing this because it's important, but at some point in time, we're going to have to move forward. If you want to have sidebars and discuss a number of these things, that's fine. And even on the 18th when we come back. But to refute numbers here and there at this particular point, we can just say, yep, the numbers, refute it, and then we drive on. But what we're getting into now is people looking for information while we're on the line.
Well, I mean, Mr. Chairman, the witnesses gave us about an hour of testimony. We all have questions to ask. It's a 30-page piece of legislation that commits the state to a 20-year deal worth billions of dollars. We need to get some clarity on a lot of these things. I don't think any of the questions I asked aren't relevant.
I'm going to give you the latitude on that, leader. I do understand what you're trying to do, but what we're getting into these pauses, and this is time consuming. Mark, yeah, are these the kind of what we used to call sidebars that I know you guys have written letters to each other, I think.
You've been copied on them, Chairman.
Yeah, well, I don't know if they were love letters, but they were good letters, though, to get this information, because what we're doing now is what we're not going to do is go over the entire CCA report tonight. That's not going to happen. But we do need to make sure we go over the pertinent parts of that report. And I've already said that on the 18th, we're going to come back and probably talk about this again. So it's not that the information won't be discussed, because it is important information.
Okay, then I'll finish this thread. And Mr. Chairman, the witnesses have represented to us in the past, and I think they've presented Professor Tabaldi's report from Bryant, and that has potential annual taxes of $23,545 per job. The liquidated damage penalty that the state is assessing in this legislation for not meeting the jobs guarantee is only $6,400 per job. So we need to determine what the state anticipates its benefit from those jobs is going to be, and we need to match the liquidated damage penalty per job to the amount the state should expect to realize as a benefit. We need to get the benefit of our bargain. If they're not going to hire the requisite number of employees, we shouldn't be out. There should be a penalty that matches the benefit of our bargain. I have a lot more, Chairman. If anyone else has any questions, I'll yield and I'll come back. Thank you.
Okay. Did you have some questions, Rep. Barris? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This, again, I think it's in line with what, Leader Felipe was saying. Obviously, this is important, certainly because I think we have to go back to our communities and we have to sort of be able to answer some of the questions that Leader Felipe has posed. My question, Chairman, and I think it would be for Bob Vincent, is that most of us on this committee and people out there listening to what we're discussing perhaps are not as informed as you guys are in crafting whatever contract will come out of this. We're basically giving you a rough draft so you can go ahead and develop a contract. And to my question would be, if we look at now page 2, line 4, and then page 5, line 16, the language is very vague and confusing in terms of the jobs, what types of jobs. I mean, it talks about employed by an affiliate or a person providing outsourcing, technology consulting, or temporary employment. Can you give us the layman sort of version of this?
Yes, I can. And I think I'd refer back to Sharon's comments about the specificity with which the enabling legislation is drafted so that the contract reflects that. And I think she described accurately, as you have, the types of jobs that are there particularly in the technology industry. There are a number of people that we cause to be employed that if you went through our office during normal periods of time, you would see them as looking as if they're an IGT employee, when in fact they may have been outsourced from a company to work on projects and do that. We're causing them to be employed. The taxes benefit to the state, and that is a standard way for us, for the state, particularly in the Department of Commerce, to count those types of employees. So these are employees we would normally bring on to either work on projects. In some cases, you're outsourcing fundamental activities, a copy center, which doesn't sound significant. In our business, it is, because a great deal of our business is replying to RFPs and the like, which is a substantial effort. We control that process, but we might bring in people who come to work in our facility each day, meet the definition of an employee in all ways, and are providing services to us. So I would tell you that this outsourcing is a big part of business today. You have major companies in downtown Providence and the former Journal building that are outsourcing companies that service Rhode Island companies as well. So we have similar arrangements and relationships in just the manner in which it's done. Some technical expertise prefer to be consultants so they can work on many projects, and that's really the nature of it. But this is very standard with the way the Department of Commerce counts employees for all of its projects and all of the ways it gives out benefits.
Yeah, Bob, again, I feel like I said on page 2, line 4 is a little different than page 5, line 16. So, I mean, I get it. I mean, I understand what you're telling me that, and maybe hiring a temporary person, but we're looking for a full-time FTEs equivalent to those 20 some odd in terms of hours of employment, 2,080 hours of employment per one individual per year. So I had some concern about, saying a part-time person, a temporary person being able to do that.
But I think as Sharon pointed out, it all has to add up to an FTE. That's the commitment. It's not just someone we employ. It's not a head count. It's an FTE. So if they work 20 hours, then you have to combine that with other things to get a full FTE, and that's what Sharon was pointing out. I recognize it can be a little complicated, but the business world is complicated now. Companies operate this way. Many of the major companies in the state do that. That's why you have major outsourcing companies coming into Rhode Island, is because they're looking for things not just in technology, in accounting, bill payments, very traditional activities that companies have normally hired people for. You have companies that are coming in and providing these services at very attractive rates. They do that, and we're causing these people to be employed, and we believe, as the state does in all of its contracts, that it's giving out benefits, that these people should be counted. So we're pretty comfortable with that arrangement and happy to describe it further if you need something.
No, Bob. I think, like I said, I just think it's vague and sometimes it's confusing. And I think the folks who are out there, when, if they don't have the benefit of having this discussion with you, they will think it's a little bit misleading. That's all I was saying, but I get it, and I appreciate your explanation.
No intent, no intent to mislead, just to mirror what's being done with the state and other contracts and the like. And I think the state still gets the benefit of the tax on payroll.
No, absolutely. I'm saying, I didn't say that you were misleading anybody. I'm just saying folks who
No, I know.
perhaps don't have the benefit of having this discussion with you and you explaining to us in layman's term might think, we're trying to do something nefarious or something. That's all I was getting at, Bob.
Okay, understood.
Thank you.
Transparency is very important. That's why we're here. Thank you, Representative Burrows. Next up is going to be Representative Nandone and then Representative Ruggiero.
Thank you. This question would be for Mark Cristofoli. The problem I have with this piece of legislation, it essentially insulates other companies from coming in and trying to bid on this. And Twin River Management Group had this same problem when the IGT was going at it alone. And I'd just like to read a quote from the Journal Bulletin on October 2019. It says, "It's been proven that competition would save Rhode Island taxpayers millions. And it's time leaders put Rhode Island taxpayers before corporate welfare. Tell your legislators to vote no on this sweetheart deal. When companies compete for state business, all Rhode Islanders win." And then I'll just read a quick one from September of 2019. Rhode Island should follow the law and bid the contract. What does it take to get a bid in Rhode Island? Question mark. Tell your legislators to vote no on this sweetheart deal. When companies compete for the state's business, all Rhode Islanders win. My question to you, Mr. Cristofoli, is what has changed? This is coming from...
Everything has changed. I appreciate the question very much. Oh, I'm sorry, did I interrupt you? I apologize.
No.
I thought you had finished.
No, I'm finished. Thanks.
I'm sorry. Honestly, I did not mean to interrupt you. I thought you had said what has changed, and I was starting to answer. Everything has changed. So first of all, 80% of the revenues from the third largest revenue source are now subject to competition, as I indicated. The old deal, IGT controlled 85% of the machines, and there wasn't competition driving that third largest revenue source. Remember, it's $300 million a year coming through the VLTs. What we did in this compromise is we set it up so that IGT only has 40% of the machines. There are 5 other companies that compete with them. They own the rest of the 60%. And then every single year, it's honest competition day in and day out. Those that perform better get more. Those that perform worse get less. And the system, this whole program has the benefit of competition for the entire 20-year period, right? Also, if you take a look at the battle that happened publicly and the 2 years worth of hearings, this whole legislation has been the subject of an unbelievably public, transparent competition to get to these terms. So it's not like it's just one company getting everything. It was set up in such a way that there was competition. The state stepped in, the state outlined its priorities, and as a result of that, we come up with an important three-way partnership that actually advances the interests of the state so much more than picking up little isolated instances and trying to put those out to bid. The vast majority of the economics here are subject to competition every single day.
All right, thank you. And then next up is Representative Ruggiero, and then Leader Filippi is second round after Representative Ruggiero.
Thank you. Obviously, jobs, economic development, and tax revenue are very important for the state. And this legislation allows the Department of Revenue and the lottery to negotiate the deals of the details of this. My question, I'm not sure if it would be, well, Mr. Cristofoli, there you are, or yeah, perhaps you could answer this. There's a lot of conversation about the upfront payment to the state, and I noticed it's a $25 million payment that is $12.5 million each year, 2023 and then 2024. Why is the state waiting 2 years for an upfront payment? Is there any opportunity to maybe have the payment made 2022, 2023?
Mark?
Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah. If I could take that rep.
Thanks.
So the agreement we had with the administration, and was discussed at length with the Senate and the House, is that we would spread out the investments in the initial several years. So the structure has always been, in year one, we're going to replace the traditional lottery system. In years 2 and 3, the $25 million payment would be spread out across 2 fiscal years. So that has been always part of the agreement, that we structure it in that way to spread out the investments in the early stages of the term.
So that's essentially what is going to occur.
That is correct.
And there's no opportunity to change that or increase the dollars because that changes the entire piece of legislation, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Leader Filippi.
Thank you. This is for the panel. I just have a few questions in this round here. For the panel, I know Maryland was cited where an example of owning machines doesn't work, but 85% of machines throughout the country are owned and only 15% are leased. So there's a reason that 85% of casino owners own machines instead of leasing them. So I'm trying to understand why the state wouldn't be capable of taking advantage of the economics that 85% of casino owners take advantage of every day in this country.
It's very simple. That's where casinos are buying them. Experts that understand how to manage the system can make the decisions that are needed to manage the floor, to manage the business in a proper function. That's one of the fundamental problems with the Christensen report. It's just taking a look at casino buying patterns and then trying to apply it to a lottery division. And here, what essentially would happen is in other states, if you look at a competitive state like Massachusetts, for example, those facilities get to buy machines and they buy 85 or 90 or even 95%, at least only 5%, and they pay a much lower tax rate and they get to manage it. We don't have the luxury of buying our own machines because the state provides them, and the state has the highest tax rate in the country, and then as a result of that, it provides the machines through this leasing model. It would be a major mistake for the state to try and do things the way a private commercial operator does things, with all of those pitfalls. You know, a company can map out a 5-year budget, can make decisions on what it needs to buy to compete, can change those decisions, can take machines that are underperforming and write them off, and do all sorts of things, and the states can't do that. And that's exactly what Maryland found. They found by them buying the machines, it created all those problems, and as a result of that, what they did was they reduced the tax rate and allowed the facilities to go buy them themselves. Right? And it's a really important point that they reduced the tax rate, right? You can't just keep the tax rate and then put the burden on a commercial operator to go buy them. And that we're not seeking any change in the tax rate here. And actually, your model, the proposed model you're advocating, is an effective tax increase on us from 60% to 67%. And then you're saying the state gets the benefit of that 7% tax increase. And then don't worry, we'll provide you the machines you need to compete over the next 20 years. That's a death sentence for us. We will not be able to compete in that environment if every year we're subject to the whims of the budget process to see if we can get machines to compete with these facilities in Connecticut and Massachusetts that can go buy machines whenever they want. That's why this is such an essential part of this legislation, is giving us the machines that we need to compete. And you and I have had this discussion in public multiple times at these hearings. From Twin Rivers' perspective, it's all about the machines. This legislation solves it. It wasn't solved before, and we need to have it solved. And turning it over to the state only makes it worse, not better.
So I want to be clear. When you call
Lippy, thank you very much for not interrupting him or anything like that. Mr. Kristen Foley, if you just have a little bit more succinct answers, and because I know that Representative or Leader Filippi was about to interject a couple of times in there. We want to limit the back and forth, but we want to make sure that this is a smooth operation. So questions, answers, like that.
Sure.
Thank you very much,
and I will do that. And I apologize. I can't see the video, so I don't know, Leader, when you're trying to interrupt. Because when I'm talking, all I see is myself, unfortunately, and it's terrible to look at.
I didn't know when you were done. To be clear, when you call it a tax rate, that's the percent the state takes as the operator, the owner-operator of the machines. You're calling that a tax, the 60?
It is a tax.
The 60% that the state retains is a tax?
It's the fundamental model in every operation in the country. The portion of the VLT gaming that a state keeps is a tax. Here, the rate is 60.8% or whatever it was that Sharon showed. And then in your model, the 60% goes to 67.8 or whatever the right number is.
So we can go through the details, but the 7% is what is paid to lease the machines, I believe, the 7% of net terminal income. So it wouldn't affect Twin Rivers' take because the 28.1% that you take wouldn't be touched. Mr. Gendron, you're going to respond to Christian Capital Advisors' analysis on the central management system before probably I went off on a tangent. Could you circle back and just kind of respond to their analysis on the state could be overpaying for the central management system?
Sure.
Go down that road. Thank you.
Yes, my pleasure. And, I've got a variety of comments to the CCA report, but consistent with what the chair requested, I'll keep my comments very brief. When you look at the Video Central system, the states that the CCA and you have mentioned are Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, Mass, and Kansas. And the system is substantively the same in all four of those states. What differentiates the rates between Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, Mass, and Kansas is the additional services that a state of Rhode Island outsources as part of this contract. For example, in Rhode Island, we provide the VLT technicians to support all 5,200 VLTs in the state 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We don't do that in Pennsylvania, Kansas, or Massachusetts. We provide the spare parts inventory for all 5,200 VLTs in Rhode Island, regardless of manufacturer. We don't do that in Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and Kansas. We provide paper, ticket in, ticket out paper for every VLT in the state of Rhode Island on an annual basis. We don't do that in any of the other states. We're providing Rhode Island an upfront cash payment. We didn't provide an upfront cash payment. So the difference between Rhode Island and these other jurisdictions, which was not contemplated in the CCA report, is the additional scope of services, which significantly, as you can see, drives up the costs and therefore the rate.
Thank you. And finally, for this round, just two brief questions for IGT. Are there any outstanding investment obligations in your current contract which have not been fulfilled that will be rolled over into the new $150 million guaranteed investment, or that would not be fulfilled if we enter into this new contract? And two, is IGT currently in compliance with the current jobs mandate, and was it throughout 2020? Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Lita. So the answer to your first question is IGT has met all its material obligations remaining in the existing master contract. So that's point number one. And there is 7 contract amendments and multiple letter agreements between the state of Rhode Island and IGT that reflect us meeting all of our commitments. Obviously, the headcount obligation will remain as is through 2023. In 2020, when we reported on 2019 numbers, we were in excess of the employee threshold count. Given everything that happened associated with COVID, when we report in, I believe, May of this year for 2020's actuals, I expect it to be slightly below the requirement.
And what about currently, as we sit here today?
Currently today, it is still below the 1,000 threshold of the existing contract.
Without giving the exact number, how much below are you guys below the contractual obligations? Percent or number?
Yes, I don't have the exact number. We understand our obligations. We're doing everything we can to meet it. Obviously, in 2020, when the pandemic hit and the casinos closed, right, we had a furlough where we had VLT technicians. The casinos were closed, so we had to lay them off. So it is safe to say that we are under for 20. I'll have the exact number in 20, probably in about 3 months, and we will report to the Commerce Corporation at that time, consistent with our contractual responsibilities.
Thank you.
Okay, that's end of your round, right? All right, so we have Representative Tabone on the line, I believe. But also, I want to remind everybody that we do still have administration. We have folks from, I believe, Revenue and Lottery on the line. So they can almost act maybe as like a third-party validator. So I know there's a couple of issues where you go back and forth. So I would request the members of administration, if you hear it, if you have heard any questions that you think you'd be able to shed some light on, we would appreciate you to chime in after Representative Tabone. That being said, Representative Tabone.
Thank you, Chair. Everybody, thank you again, and unfortunately I couldn't be there with you or in presence in committee, but Mr. Christopher, when John Taylor came a few years back to talk about the expansion in the casino, he talked about the clientele that you guys target or look to attract is a clientele that is
We lost your sound, Rep. Tabone. All right, Representative Tabone is still, he's trying, but we can't hear you, my friend.
very, hear me now?
Yep, you just came back on.
Okay.
We lost you again. Looks like you're moving in slow motion. So if you want to move into another room or something like that where you have better Wi-Fi, we can bring up folks from administration if they are still online.
Yes. Can you hear me,
Yeah,
Mr.
is
Chairman?
that Director Furklow?
Good evening. Thank you.
All right, Director. So
Sure.
you thank you for staying with us. You heard several of the back and forths and the questions that we've had on the committee, and then I'm sure you've been aware of the questions that have come across your desk throughout these multiple years of discussions on this issue. Anything that you would like to bring to light? Any questions you might have answers to? If you could just go ahead, I appreciate it.
Sure. So just a brief statement, if I may, Mr. Chair. So, during the prior legislative sessions, the lottery had participated in discussions with the state's partners, IGT and Twin River. And we've testified before both the House and Senate Finance Committees concerning the proposed legislation extending the IGT and Twin River master contracts. We've had input into the current version of the legislation that is before you. And while the governor is supportive of the work of the lottery that has been done to date, he has indicated that he looks forward to taking into account the testimony that is given tonight and during future hearings, and then carefully considering and reviewing the final version of the bill that is forwarded to him by the General Assembly. As far as just follow-ups, there's a fundamental difference in the way the Rhode Island casinos operate and the private casinos operate. And let me just try and do it from a cash perspective. In a private casino in most states, basically the casino would have customers, they'd put money into the machines, they'd have prizes, the casino would have an accounting system, a VLT central system perhaps, and the casino would determine how much income it makes. And from that determination, the casino would pay the state. Just like the private businesses, the other private businesses in Rhode Island do. They determine how much their income is, and they determine how much revenue is and their expenses. It doesn't work that way at all here. So on a daily basis, we move the money, the gross amount of the money out of the casino, and that comes into lottery accounts. And then we reconcile those cash balances to our various systems to make sure every dollar is there. And then at some point in the future, when all the reconciliations are done, we move the money back to Twin River, their Twin Rivers portion back to them. So it's a very different model, if you will, because by Rhode Island Constitution, we are the operator of casinos. So I think the other questions were largely answered to Sharon's question when she was going through the deck, and great job on the presentation, Sharon and House Finance team. But to her question around iLottery, she's correct. We did introduce a fairly limited in scope iLottery product in April, but the full functionality of that product will not be realized until we implement the interactive module, which is part of this contract. And that will be implemented a year after the central system is implemented. And so here at Lottery, we have an issue just of we can't implement every system at once. We just don't have the bandwidth to do that. And so we'll be implementing systems sequentially. I'm happy to take other questions from the committee.
All right, thank you very much. Really appreciate that. I think you were able to plug in some of those missing pieces. And it looks like it spurred a couple of more questions from Leader Filippi. Go right ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Vice. Thank you very much, Vice Chair. A couple questions, please, Director. So getting back to the notion of the state's approximately 60% being a tax, that's really not a tax. That's the take that the owner of the license gets for its business. Is that a little more on point than calling the 60% a tax?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you call it. I mean, I call it kind of an NTI share, if you will, or an operating revenue share. But you know, in a typical situation, it is a tax to an operator.
But is this a typical situation in that our state constitution requires the operator to be the state, and don't we hire Twin River as our agent and IGT as our agent and just share a portion of the net terminal income with them? Isn't it our business?
Essentially, yes. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's important for the committee to keep in mind. Moving on to page 21 of the legislation, one thing we really haven't spoken about what this does is that it extends the UTGR master agreement, it seems for another 20 years. Is that the master agreement that sets forth Twin River, now Bally's, portion of that net terminal income? I think it's around 28.1%.
I assume it is. I've got Marilyn on the line and Valerie on the line also, but yeah, I assume that's where that share is laid out.
I understand. I know there's a lot of agreements. So I just think it's important for the committee to keep in mind that we're not just extending our relationship with IGT in this new joint venture by 20 years. It appears to me from this that we're extending our relationship with Twin River, now Bally's, the relationship for 20 years. And that relationship has IGT and Twin River taking, I believe, 28.1% of casino revenues. And in 2019, with the VLTs, Twin River takes 28.1% of VLT revenues. In 2019, that was $145 million. So I just think it's important to keep that in mind when we're talking about Twin River making investments, or they wouldn't make investments if we don't pass this bill. I think Mr. Christopherly said in the beginning that the expansion, this 50,000-foot expansion, is essential for the continued viability of the operation.
Is there any questions on that?
So, yeah, there is generally a question. The generally question is like, I would ask everyone to keep in mind that some of the declarative, the sky is falling threats that Twin River won't do this expansion if we don't pass this bill. I don't know if I agree, because they have $145 million revenues based on the current 28.1%. If that was me, I'd be doing everything I can to reinvest my money to make more people come, especially when you're competing against Massachusetts and Connecticut. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Any questions for the director for COLA still out there? No? And then I don't know if we are getting Representative Tabone back, but I'll take this opportunity just to read off again the names of the folks that have supplied written testimony in support. So we have Elizabeth Richards, Eve Brothman, Falvey Linen Supply, George Neeg, Gerard Caro, Greater Providence, Greater Newport Chambers, I imagine, Horizon, that could also be Verizon, Jackie's Galaxy, JBP Limo LLC, Jenna McFlemmy, Jennifer Webb Subway, John Roskowski, Johnny Rockets, Kayla Farrens, Kevin Keogh, Kimberly Frazier, Christy Matos, Laurie Cohoon, LG Communications, Liz Colucci, Mancini Beverage, Mancina Alves, Mark Palma, Mary Lou Hudson, and I'll just look up to see if, are we good to go with Representative Tabone? All right, Representative Tabone, you're on the phone?
All right, yeah, I think so.
Perfect, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great, thank you. So I was, to any of the members of IGT or Bally's, a few years back when John Taylor reached out to us and for the expansion of the hotel, he talked about a client that's not a sophisticated client. We're talking now about doing a luxury expansion on the hotel, if I'm correct, right? That was mentioned?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So my question is, now that we have a name, who is that target audience going after? Are we talking about people are going to be flying in, or are you going to be doing the typical things that the larger entities have done about, getting foreigners or whatever it may be to bring into the facilities? Is that how it's going to work?
Not to that level, Representative. We're just trying to marginally increase our ability to compete with some of the amenities that are offered in Connecticut and in Massachusetts. So we're not targeting people that are flying into Rhode Island to visit our facility, but we are targeting the people that are driving to Connecticut and Massachusetts as opposed to staying in state. And, our overall target profile for customer hasn't changed significantly, but we're starting to go just upmarket just a little bit so that we can capture a little more of that value here in Rhode Island.
Okay, so you're talking about getting people just over the border, but providing them, a nicer amenity, just, compared to our competitors. That's it.
That's correct.
Okay. Secondly, going back to the VLTs, and I'm just, I'm again listening to both Leader Filippi, Rep. Barrows. I'm trying to understand this dynamic. At the end of the day, who is going to own the VLTs, right? I know Leader Filippi has made his case about why doesn't Rhode Island buy them. You've explained as to why, but is it the joint venture who's buying the VLTs?
Yes, that's correct. It's the joint venture that buys them. They put up the capital, and then in exchange for that, the joint venture gets the 7% of revenues, and then it has to meet all of the buying thresholds and other requirements that are set in the legislation. And we are highly confident that gives us a much more competitive floor.
Okay, so with that said, how do these other, the other actors, the other players, the essentially IGT's competition, how do they actually compete for that 40 or 50% of the floor when you guys buy them? Do you just sell them? Is there an even exchange? What's the setup if a machine or a company is not performing to be able to move them quickly?
So that's part of the joint venture, and it's spelled out in the legislation. If a machine's not performing, we're required up to 5% to take it off the floor and then go spend our money to go buy new machines. And the place that we can buy the machines from is dictated by the competitive formula and the efficiency process that Sharon mentioned. So we can't just buy from anywhere. Those that perform better, we have to buy more from. Those that perform worse lose machines, and then we buy them from somewhere else. And IGT, we can only buy machines. buy machines from IGT to the extent they're overperforming above the 40%. Otherwise, they lose machines as well.
Okay, so let's say you have a particular company that's not performing. The machine is $25,000 roughly, right? That's what they range?
Yep.
Okay, so if they're not performing, how much time do you give them? Do you give them 6 months? Do you give them a year? What's that time before you guys say, okay, we need to 86, take it off the floor and go get another one, and then you see what the others are doing, and you move on to purchase the performing ones?
So it's done every single year in the first quarter for a 13-week period. That's the efficiency formula process. And remember, ultimately, the lottery gets to control all of this. And under the legislation, there has to be an annual report on the efficiency formula and the performance of every vendor of machines.
Okay, so that's where I'm a bit confused, in the sense where we've always said that, you know, when we talk about free markets and all these things, it's my idea that if you have these the different entities who compete for the space on the floor, and they actually and the joint venture doesn't own it, wouldn't it move a lot faster? Wouldn't it be a lot more fluid, and that competitive atmosphere be more profitable for the state? Because if something's not performing 6 months later or whatever time, we don't have to. The joint venture doesn't have to buy or sell. It's just is it as simple as talking to one of these entities and asking them to change it?
Yeah, but practically speaking, I understand what you're saying, but that's not how it works. So they don't have an obligation to do it. They either lose the machine or they can put a new one on. Through our ability to purchase, where there are other things we can do to try and maximize performance as well through game conversions and other changes. But ultimately, the difference between having the machine provider, having us, the joint venture, buy it and the state buying it, is that we don't believe the state will take the write-off on a poor performing machine and go buy another one, whereas we know we have to and we want to, because we need the performing machine.
Yeah, Mark, if I can just add in there, Rep, for a minute. The floor at Twin River and Tiverton today is configured essentially like every other casino in the United States. Over the last 2 years, we have brought in products from third parties, such as LaRue's, Aristocrat, Incredible Technologies, AGS. These are companies that have machines in commercial casinos around the country. So the floors that you have today are configured in such a competitive fashion. The difference between a commercial casino and what we have right here, when we buy these machines, if they last a year or 2 years or 10 years, each year they're subject to efficiency. So we buy the machines, the joint venture will buy the machines. If it falls below the efficiency level in year one, we eat that investment and have to replace it. There's no discretion. So that ensures that the state of Rhode Island will have the benefit of every Class 3 slot machine provider in the United States on its floor, and annually, unlike what the CCA addressed or what happens in real life in the commercial casinos, they're not going to eat that investment. They're going to move that product to a separate area of the floor or leave it out there. We don't have that discretion. It has to be removed and it has to be replaced. And it's that comfort level that you should take, that the state of Rhode Island is protected in that fashion.
Okay, I just have two very quick questions that I believe you can answer quickly. And again, look, I think that you guys know, we've all had conversations with you guys. I'm pro-business, I'm pro-Rhode Island, I'm pro-jobs, and I want to see this happen. And obviously, we're all fighting for the best deal for the people of Rhode Island, and that's who we respond to. So I want to say that in regards to the minimum amount of time that you need to make sure that this deal goes through smoothly is how much? Because a few years back, we were talking about Tuesday, and it was 4 years out. How much time do we need to make sure that this goes as best as it can with the time that we have left.
So, Rep, if your question is, as we've been discussing for several years, one of the highest priorities for the administration and the General Assembly is to protect your third largest revenue stream. At that juncture, I advised the committees that the amount of time, this was back in 2019, late 2019, the amount of time needed to issue an RFI, issue an RFP, award a contract, and have a vendor install the system, both lottery and video lottery. In my opinion, in October of 2019, that time frame had passed. So you've lost that window. In my opinion, and you can look at every other conversion in the United States lottery marketplace in the last 10 years, it would be reckless to try and convert between now and May of 2023 to convert your traditional lottery and your video lottery central system in that time frame. It simply can't be done.
Okay. All right. And then last thing is basically, I forgot on which page, but for IGT has until 2026 to be able to make the changes of their slot machines. Is that what it is?
In essence, what that is, as part of the agreement, it gives IGT a 3-year window of immunity from efficiency.
Okay, and so, Mr. Gendra, with all due respect, you guys are in front of this. You guys are riding this train. More than riding it, you're leading this train. Why do we? All right, you guys are looking to be competitive. Why do we need to look 6 years out from this point, or 5 years out? Do you guys not feel that you're competitive enough right now?
Well, Rep, it's only 3 years, right? It's effective starting in 2023.
I understand that, but basically what I'm getting at is that, it's a competitive industry and an environment. But that extra 3 years, is there something magical that's being worked on right now in order to make sure that I understand it's a good, everybody's going to want immunity in some way, and it buys you a little time. But do you feel that right now you guys are the most competitive? Because I mean that's a lot of time to put yourself in a good spot.
Well, I would look at it this way. So this contract started in 2003. So that's 18 years. In 18 years, we've been managing positions on the properties. I would say on 3 occasions over 18 years, the state actually had to exercise efficiency against IGT. So it certainly has a proven track record that it's going to manage and configure the floor in an environment that is competitive. And I think the results speak for themselves when you look at how well both facilities have performed to the benefit of the single largest beneficiary, which is the state of Rhode Island, in the face of stiff competition from Connecticut and now Massachusetts.
I'll just leave it at this. Respectfully, if my memory serves me properly, that is not what Mr. Christofoli indicated in 2019. He wasn't really crazy about the performance of IGT back then. And unless that was around that time period, he said that IGT was one of the least performance, I think, at the time. So I don't know which chart or what we can look at, but the Rhode Island Lottery has had a very close relationship with IGT for a long time, and so I don't have enough data in front of me to be able to redact that. But I just remember very clearly back then, a few years back, and I didn't miss any of the committee meetings, but I think Mr. Christofoli made that very clear. And Mark, please tell me if I'm wrong.
No, yeah, so you're not wrong. That was in 2019. That was on a very different structure where IGT controlled 85% of the machines, and we as Twin River felt like we weren't getting the new machines that we needed or the competitive balance. And since then, it's been solved. It's been solved in two ways. First of all, since then, IGT has done a spectacular job. They've given us over 1,000 new machines, or close to 1,000 new machines in the last 2 years, all from non-IGT providers, as Jay mentioned. And when you look at their performance now, they're neck and neck with everyone else in the market. We feel really great about that. The second thing is in the legislation, we pegged them at a maximum of 40% of the floor, and then everyone else gets the balance, and we instituted an efficiency process. And that's why we're now partners. If it were still the old way, it would continue to be a challenge for us because we think this is the single most important issue. But now we think it's been solved.
But how long were they not performing prior to the arrangement? That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. So the performance, they performed exceptionally well up until 2015. Okay. So the first 12 years of the deal. Then what happened is GTEC and IGT merged, and their percentage of the floor got to be a lot larger. So it went from 50% to 85%. And then over 16, 17, and 18, you start to see the performance decline, right? And then it picked back up again. Obviously, we had a pandemic, but so there were only a couple of years. I wouldn't disagree with Jay's statement that it was 3 years. I just think it happened to be a couple of critical years in a row that were leading into this negotiation.
So okay. And Chair, thank you so much. I just want to say that it seems I'm perplexed a bit because now it seems like you're expecting a 3-year drought if you're looking to create the 3-year immunity. I mean, I'll leave it at that, but that's worrisome for me.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Tabone. And that's the whole point of the committee process is to air your concerns, get it out there, because this is the people's vetting process. And I know we are getting near the end of the committee hearing. I see Leader Filippi's gears turning, so he'll probably be the last one to ask a couple of questions or one question he had promised. But in the meantime, let me please just run through the list again of people that have provided written testimony to make sure that everybody's on the record. McInnes Media and Marketing, McLaughlin and Moran Inc., Michael Carpenter, Michael Sabatoni, Nikki Wilson, Packaging More, Pamela Wilson, Patricia Rogers, Paul Hansen, Raki Ra, Richard Duarte, Richard Moore, Robert Corvasi, Signature Printing, Squad Locker, Stephen Bell, Teresa Lauro, Terry Bradley, Timothy Spatz, Tom Napolitano, Town of Lincoln, Victor Company LLC, Wendy Montgomery, W.H. Peps, and then William Smith. So those are all the folks that have provided written testimony on this important matter. And that being said, it looks like Leader Filippi had a couple of succinct questions.
Succinct, thank you very much. Mr. Christofoli, getting back to my question to Director Furcolo on the extension of the URTG master contract, is that the contract that sets forth the Twin River table game take and the VLT take?
Yes, and that contract currently goes to 2030, so it's a 13-year extension.
A 13-year extension. And is my research correct that it's 83.6% take of the table games, $136 million in 2019, and a 28.1% take of the VLTs, $145 million in 2019?
I'd have to go verify those numbers, so I can't tell you off the top of my head. I'm sure if you've looked them up and they're right, but I just can't tell you right now.
I looked them up, so they may not be right. My next question is, you've told us that we should take a certain level of comfort in the joint venture. I've expressed to you, Mr. Christofoli, that I think that any terms should be part of the legislation, that we shouldn't be relying on extraneous agreements between Bally's and IGT to protect the state. Absent that, would you provide a copy of the joint venture operating agreement to this committee so we can review it before considering this legislation?
Yeah, so we don't have an operating agreement yet. We just have a term sheet. It covers it. I'm certainly happy to share it. And if you remember, the last time we went down this round, we had the 40%, IGT being pegged at 40%, wasn't in the legislation. It was just in the agreement. And you asked for that to be put in the legislation, and so it's in the legislation now.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. This is a work in progress. I would really want to read that if it's going to be the thing that protects the state. I think we should be able to see it and understand the terms of the agreement between the two companies, because that's supposed to be protecting the taxpayers. Lastly, I would ask IGT to respond briefly to the Christensen report on the instant tickets, where they state that, as we described in this report, the data indicate that by only providing instant tickets from one supplier, Rhode Island is not only leaving potential instant ticket sales on the table, that spending is being exported to Massachusetts. We really didn't get into instant tickets, and I know it's a big deal, and Christensen had a lot to say on it, and I would just love to hear your position in response. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. So yes, I will comment on that. As I said earlier, if Rhode Island is losing instant ticket sales to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, it's principally because of the payout difference between the Commonwealth and the state of Rhode Island. Massachusetts is the highest instant ticket per capita state in the United States by a wide margin. So comparing any state to Massachusetts, I don't think is fair, especially the state that borders it as closely as Rhode Island does with its million population. As far as having the CCA saying one of the reasons is because you only have one instant ticket provider, there are 11 states in the United States currently that have one instant ticket provider. And as a point of note also for the committee, Scientific Games had the primary printing responsibilities in the state of Rhode Island from 2009 to 2017. IGT took it over in 2017 to now. And if you look at the compound annual growth rate of when IGT has had the contract over the last 4 years compared to when Scientific Games was the primary printer, you will see that our growth is about 3 times larger than when they were the primary instant ticket provider.
Thank you, and I finish, and I appreciate the indulgence from the witnesses and Chair and Vice Chair. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leader. We always indulge the knowledge that you give us. It's one of the reasons that we have a structure is so that everyone can get a chance to get the pertinent information out that they need. As I said at the beginning of these hearings a couple of years ago, my primary focus is to make sure we have good hearings, get good information, because nearly a third of what we need to run this state comes from that operation. So everybody's input needs to be involved in it. I'm sorry, Rep. Quarchochi, I see you raising your hand. I'm sorry. Rep. Quarchochi, you're on, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. I was trying to wave my flag and all kinds of stuff.
I'm sorry, I'll take the hit on that. Your leader did not inform me. He wasn't watching either, so that he was on. So I will not throw him under the bus, though.
Well, you know I'll forgive him.
I know it. Please forgive me. You're on, sir.
So I don't know if I was marked present all night, Mr. Chairman.
You're here. Yes, we got you all night. You're here.
Okay, so to Mr. Christofouli, he stated that he disagreed with the Christensen report in general. Is that correct?
Mark, are you still there? He's asking if you disagree with the CCA report in general.
Yes.
Okay.
So what about if my recollection serves me correctly, the 10 years was more or less was the industry standard for a contract, the length of a contract. Do you disagree with that?
No, so they actually said it's 10 years or more, and then they said this is basically a 10 plus 10 because of the replacement cycle. They also said IGT is the best in the business, and there's very little risk to the state in doing this 10 plus 10. The only risk is essentially that if IGT goes downhill so much in 10 years, it's a little bit of a risk, but the CCA actually said it's a negligible risk on the 10 plus 10 structure.
So IGT is a worldwide company, correct?
Yes.
Where else do you have 20-year contracts?
California is an evergreen. They can answer it better, but they have lots of places that are in the 15 to 20-year range. Jay, can you answer that?
20 specifically, please.
Yes, so Rep. Jay Jenner speaking here. So there are a variety of states that are in that neighborhood. So Washington State, for example, issued an RFP that we won. It was a 10 plus a 10 for a total of 20. The state of Florida issued an RFP for a 10 and 3-3-year options for a total of 19, of which they entered into a contract for 13 years up front. North Carolina was a 10 and a 5 for a total of 15. So the trend in the industry is much longer contracts. I would also offer to you that, as Mark said, it's 2 10-year contracts. So essentially now, and then in the middle of the contract, we will install the latest central system, the latest software, the latest terminals, and the latest communications network. We're currently at 5G. If we're at 8G then, we're going to put in 8G. And that is how we ensure that the state of Rhode Island will always have the most robust infrastructure available.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And while I'm talking to you, you made a comment that it would be reckless to make a conversion from now till 2023, or not to make a conversion, correct?
Yes. So my point is, the short answer is yes. Would you like me to elaborate a bit more on it?
Well, no. My point is that essentially, I'm trying to get at the point that technology is going by quicker than we can even process it, correct? So is that the reason that you're saying that it would be reckless because of the advances in technology?
No.
Now till 20?
No, not at all. What I'm telling you is if you look at the last 10 years in the United States lottery industry, and you look at the amount of time every other state has taken from the time they issued an RFI to the time they went live with the new system, that's 3 years. That's 3 years, because it takes time to put out an RFI. It takes time to put out an RFP. It takes time for the Rhode Island Lottery to evaluate proposals. It takes time to award, and it takes at least a year to implement, and implement in such a fashion that you preserve the revenue stream. So that's the traditional lottery. You would find for those states that have video lottery, it would be a similar path. So as you can see, the time remaining to convert the traditional lottery and the video lottery central system by May of 2023 has gone.
Okay. So do you have any concerns about the advancement of technology within 10 years in a 10-year or 20-year contract?
I don't, because I can assure you we are a state-of-the-art technology company. We've been leading the lottery industry for 30 plus years, and I'm very confident that that will continue moving forward.
Okay. The only other concern I have for any constituents they may be listening is the bidding process, and I would assume that most people that are paying attention to this meeting either own a car, maybe own a house. Whatever you do, you may call a plumber, you may call a carpenter, you may call a mechanic, and I'm going to assume that you don't go to the first tradesman that you come across to do business with. That's all. So I have a serious concern about not following an open bidding process.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. Again, as I said before, I appreciate the testimony of everyone tonight, all of the crews, the time that you spent. This is critically important because we are talking about a large chunk of what it takes to run this state. But we want to get it right the first time, and if we have your input, I think we can do that. So thanks to everybody who was online, who were here. Hope you have a good, safe afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, yes, leave us on for a minute. Oh, we have, yes, yes, Rep. Bella Wilkinson's attendance and her vote on holding off for further study is still here. Thank you so much, appreciate it.